IT, we good? Okay. This is the regularly scheduled July 20th, 2023 meeting. It is 6:15 PM. Our city clerk, will you call, I'm going to call roll for you.
Counselor Schechter.
Present.
Counselor Kaut.
Here.
Counselor Weimer.
Here.
Mayor Russo.
Present.
Counselor Godus.
Here.
Counselor Zelinski.
Present.
We have a quorum.
We'll move on to agenda changes and conflicts. Do we have any this evening? Agenda changes and conflicts. Take that. Oh, Counselor Godus. You're not on here. Let's see. There we go.
Yeah, I'd like to ask that we remove item H on the consent agenda. 1205 Riverside Drive acquisition to the regular agenda.
And move it to what order?
I'll leave that at your discretion. I think, we have people here presenting on the 27th Street underpass update. We have
Mhm.
3 updates. I would guess maybe after number 12, I would think, since we have other people here and it's not.
Actually, I'm going to move it between 15 and 16.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Great. With that in mind, I'm going to move on to council announcements. Do we have anyone for council announcements? This is not council comments. This is upcoming events, things that people want to share when there's a larger audience. We will move on then to citizens appearing before council. Citizens appearing before council. This is for items not on the agenda. It's my understanding there are people here this evening and there may even be a sign up sheet. While our clerk grabs those, I'm going to remind you of the rules. You each get 3 minutes. You're welcome to come up to the podium, just say your name and if you're in city limits. It's so much easier if you keep track of time than if I have to interrupt you. So if you could, see that your timer's limiting, just go ahead and wrap it up by 3 minutes. I appreciate it. Do we have a list?
Have our first and then I'll give you. Oh.
Okay.
I'll just talk for everybody.
Okay. Stephanie Davis, do you want to?
Oh, already?
Yeah, come on up.
It is something on the agenda.
Oh, it's something on the agenda.
Yeah, you're browsing the. No, it's not the same. Okay.
It's not the same thing. Maybe I should do this. If you're here to speak about 8th and Midland, get on the list and you can do it. That is not an item that's on this evening's agenda. So you'll need to come to the podium and speak during that time. So go on. If you, yeah.
You'd like to hear from me. I think I know.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Congratulations to all the new people. And hello to the seasoned veterans. I just called that lady Erin, so sorry, Erin. Congratulations. It is about 8th and Midland. My name's Stephanie Davis. Did you start the timer?
Yes, they have.
Yeah,
And-
I'll try.
Yep.
I'll zip my own.
So
But it's more
Stephanie
dramatic
Davis.
if you tell us to be quiet, but I'll
Okay.
censor myself.
Yeah, Stephanie Davis, are you within city limits?
So yes, 716 Cowden. So
Perfect,
literally
thank you.
Cowden and 8th, and as I said, at the P and Z, right across from where the trash receptacle is going to be for the 8 units that are proposed there. I live there with my husband and my dog. Right across from where the driveway where the folks will access and depart from the development. I still have a concern. I don't want to repeat myself too much from P and Z, but about 8 units having 14 cars, 1.5 cars each. Kind of speculating that most housing units have 2 cars, husband and wife or roommates. And because the housing prices and rental prices have been high for 12 or 18 months. So I mean, this infill and doubling up and all that stuff has sort of already happened. Next door to me, I think it's 2 families that moved in. So I mean, in a 1,000 square foot unit, there's 4 cars now. So that is kind of already going on. We don't have street parking for guests. So if those 8 turn into 16 and then they have people over, which they should be allowed to. I think it's going to spill out. And again, there's no parking in Cowden except for you kind of get up onto someone else's property, whoever you're visiting. Your plan does encourage, your plan that you'll be adopting tonight does encourage the infill, the ADUs. And as I said, people doubling up naturally because of the prices. They've been high already. So the infill with the building, the 8 units, I think kind of doubles the capacity of what might be occurring in our little horseshoe area there. And we do, if you actually, I live there and I work 0.4 miles away. So you could just hire me for something because I already live. Okay, that's a joke. Work for the city. But there are people, these 8 units, I really am selfish and NIMBY about just 8 units, not everything you're trying to do. I just wish you could start somewhere else and see how it works because our place is sort of the entrance to downtown and you already have sort of Meadows, Six Canyon, you have not too far out, but like Newcastle. I mean, there are ways for people to be near here to work here that don't have to be right on that corner. So that's my piece. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephanie. Lori Chase.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Lori Chase, 705 Cowden Drive. And, oops, wrong thing. We have parking limitations on Cowden Drive. I want to reiterate that for everyone listening. You cannot park legally on Cowden Drive. So where are these 1.5 cars, which is unreasonable, going to park? We have a young lady that will tell her story, and Davis Drive has limited parking now because there was not enough foresight to see a problem with the parking, and they were allowed to park anywhere. Now it is a problem. It's a safety issue, big time. This particular plan, there's not going to be people that have 1.5 cars. And they're going to have to park. Watkins had said at the planning and zoning meeting that they could park across the street at the Veltus Park Fisherman parking. Fine, but what about people, they have guests overnight? Where are those people going to park? They're going to park a couple of blocks away. Highly inconvenient for these people, and they probably don't even know it because it hasn't been built yet. The second big thing, it is really hard to get out of Cowden Drive right now. And we keep on adding more and more and more to the same situation. What does that get us? Bottlenecks. It really hurts the citizens of Glenwood Springs. And I love the Habitat for Humanity project personally. I think they're valuable. I just think this is the wrong place. Or make the development smaller and keep the parking the same. We don't need to do this. And this is supposed to be held for public use, and we have not been paying taxes on it since 2005 when it was bought. So I don't know how it could not be for public use since we haven't paid taxes. That right there says it was for public use. Thank you very much. I can't believe I'm done before the 2 minutes.
Thanks, Lori. Okay. Katie Stetson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I own a home at 627 Davis Drive,
Thank you.
and there's already been some work done there in the parking situation. When I purchased the home, I had HOA documents, and from visual appearance, it seemed that there were 2 units, 2 spaces of parking allowed in front of each of those units. And that's how it'd been for a while. I don't know how long, before I arrived, much longer than that. That's been reworked, and so there's no longer extra parking in the cul-de-sac. Those 4 parallel spaces were not assigned individually to each unit, so it's become a parking free for all. So I'm a single mom, and I have lovely roommates who help me afford my housing. And so in the meantime, being that there is not a space for me in front of my house, I park a couple blocks away. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I clean off my car, a couple blocks away, warm it up and bring it back and take my kids to school, which on a regular basis is not really a big deal. Unfortunately, in January, in the middle of a snowstorm, I had a pet passing away in the middle of the night. I had to leave my kids to tend to the pet while I walked, blocks away to clean off the car, to shovel it out. And of all the silly things, like, thank goodness it wasn't my child or something like that. But my point being that rural neighborhoods need rural neighborhood solutions, and perhaps the expectation that a full-size fire truck fits in a small space, maybe a smaller vehicle fits in a smaller space. But also, if we add 8 units, there will be even more issues. So it's, something that seems small as a parking space, but it really makes a difference in our lives.
Thank you. David Howder.
My name is David Howard. And we have spoken to a couple.
David, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly, just for protocol. You live in city limits, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
North Glen.
Okay.
We have spoken to a number of attorneys, and here is a part of what we've heard. In 2005, the city of Glenwood Springs used eminent domain to obtain property in question. The stated reason was the acquisition of this property was necessary for the construction of traffic improvements and the intersection of 8th and Midden Avenue. The petition allows for the property to be tax exempt so long that is used for transportation and other public uses. Number 2, the using of the property to squeeze in 8 housing units is not why the city used eminent domain to take this property. Even if there's a creative interpretation that selling the land to Habitat for Humanity is a public purpose, is clearly not what the purpose envisioned. Number 3, there is a long-term traffic study in place for this intersection. I should say, at this point, there is no long-term transportation study. That is the very first thing that needs to be done, and it requires the Transportation Commission and the city engineer to complete a traffic study that aligns with the city's goals, policies, and strategic plans to ensure what happens here supports the city's long-term vision and objectives. A comprehensive traffic study that includes the Midland Corridor from I-70 all the way to the new South Bridge and the impacts of that overall traffic volume that we'll have on the 8th Street connection. This study is needed and a condition of the P&Z approval. We are significantly limiting our ability to manage traffic and emergencies in the future. If we foreclose on the possibilities here with no traffic control and emergency and management development improvements, such as a roundabout, that would be a real problem and tragedy. However, let me be clear. It is not about whether we build a roundabout or not. It's about a roundabout it's not about a roundabout. It's about making sure we get a broad and complete traffic study that includes future planning for 25 to 50 years. What's more, the municipal charter states neither lands owned or used by the city for park, airport, or government purposes, nor water rights shall be sold or conveyed without an affirmative vote of the majority of qualified electors. This property has a sidewalk running through it now and has been used for a number of other purposes by the city of Glenwood Springs. The city should comply with the language and spirit and the intent of the charter and ensure there is a public vote in selling this property. In closing, Glenwood has hundreds of new units in the works, and it's just finishing completion.
David, thank you. I appreciate, yep. Thanks so much for wrapping up.
We
I
should slow
appreciate
down.
your comments.
Slow down. Thanks.
Thank you. Susan? Tribble, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I own a home at 716 Cowden Drive.
Okay.
And I guess a couple of the things that kind of bothered me, I had talked to Aaron earlier, and she never thought this would cross her desk. She didn't think it was going to be an issue. It's 90 pages long. Did you guys all read it? Did you get a chance to read it?
You haven't referenced the document. What are you
Oh, I'm
referencing?
sorry.
That's okay.
It's
It's okay.
It's the housing plan that they have.
Okay.
They've suggested this
Okay.
strategic housing
Yep.
plan project. So I guess my biggest concern with Cowden Drive in that area, it is a blind corner. It's very dangerous as it is. And with the traffic that already goes through there, even at Midland Avenue,
Mhm.
it does need to have a major traffic study. We need to see what's going to happen 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the road. We cannot project this short-term thing. The city of Glenwood Springs owns a lot of other properties that they can offer to Habitat for Humanity, which would be a win-win situation for everybody. The reason why you don't see public parking on that place is the city has very conveniently, when they first repaved, well, it goes back a little bit further, but I'm going to try to jump so I stay within my time frame. They made it so that we didn't have access to that to use it for our cars. Then when they did the road, they pushed the dirt up. So then you had kind of like this barrier, this natural barrier. And then they put up signs that said private parking. And then they put these big cement things. So no one really, you guys shut us off from being able to use it on purpose. I mean, that's just what it appears to be. People would use that land. They would take their dogs there. They would park their cars there. This isn't something that, I don't know, I guess I look at it and I see what, 7 people here and you guys are going to make a decision that affects the city in a very major way. And some of the points that it says here, that it says that it wants to reduce the number of cost burden households by 50%. I'm not really sure what this means. And then it also says provide housing sufficient to fill 100% of the unfilled jobs. Again, I'm not really sure what they're saying there. Increase the share of the workforce housed in the city from 22% to 30%. So this is the big broad picture, but I'm not sure how they're actually going to get you to do that because again, it was 90 pages, although the report goes on to have like page number 113. So I'm not really sure what pages I might have missed on it. So I just ask you, really look at this, really check out what you're doing to the city. And Cowden Drive as a little community, as a little subdivision, they need to have open space. There is no open space there for that little community. If she has to park her car 2 blocks away, there's a problem. And we need to take care of the people that live in that subdivision. And they have every right as we the people, a US citizen, a citizen of the city of Glenwood Springs, to have you guys, who are elected officials, do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Todd.
Good evening. I'm Richard Todd. I live at 616 Cowden Drive,
Thank you, sir.
a house I built 11 years ago on a bit of land that had 2 huts on it. When they relocated the sewage works, or more to the point, when they dug up the road and put 3 24-inch pipes under the bridge, they cut across that corner and took the pipes over Midland Avenue to get them all the way to the new sewage works. So at the time, I thought, my goodness, they'll never be able to build on that because I couldn't build on a 10-inch pipe at the back of my house, and they had to have a 15-foot width there. So I was a little surprised, and I thought at the time, goodness, you know, that's going to be a nice bit of grass, although being let go wild. And I understand the code enforcement lady got the city to cut the grass because it's becoming a big fire hazard. As everybody knows, and I'm reiterating what some other people have said here, that was earmarked for improvements to the road. And if it's going to be changed, then I do believe we should get the professional study done to look into what the road situation is going to be. Not just now, because it's really bad now, but I understand there's another 300 private apartments being put together up in Midland, and we've got other apartments at the other end. So this is the way people are going to come down there and want to turn. So I think that certainly should be looked at. Interestingly, on Cowden Drive, the other end of the road, There was a house there which was purchased for $700,000, being demolished. And now it's up for sale if anyone's interested. If the council wants to buy it, maybe. It's for sale for 1.75 million now. Quite a nice return on a $700,000 investment. Just a thought, you know, there are plenty of places where one could do buildings. I just would like to say, the end of this road where I live, where I built a house with the expectation that the sewage works was going to go with the stench, and it has, but now it's become a rubbish dump. And all the dirt that's being dug up from around the place is being piled up in mounds. And from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, I get a bleeping of the backhoes, and the bulldozers moving the earth around, and the boulders and all the stuff's being dumped there. Goodness knows what it's going to, I hope it's only temporary, but it looks like it's going to have to be double handled. It's going to have to be moved somewhere else. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank
And
you.
please bear these points in mind in your deliberation. Thanks. Thank you.
Cheryl Kane.
My name is Cheryl Kane. I live at 18 Owen Grand. It sounds like Cowden people are here. That's great. This project shouldn't hold that neighborhood up and damage that neighborhood of citizens who've lived here a long time based on a couple of units that have a history on that land of not selling it, of using it for other purposes, and certainly not for $1. We're seeing damage all over the city with all of the places that are being built supposedly for workforce housing, which is ridiculous because the rentals are $1,500 to $2,000 for a 1-bedroom, which doesn't accommodate any of our workforce. We'll probably have at least 1,000 units that have been built already. We have more being planned. How many is enough? And is this intersection, which has been promised for other right-of-ways and other plans for the future, what we're going to sacrifice? How much do we sacrifice in Glenwood before we've lost our community? We're on the downhill slide now. I would suggest, or I would remind you that you were elected as representatives of the people, not kings and queens who make decisions for kindergartners who can't voice their opinion. It makes me sick to realize how much we're losing in Glenwood, and this is just one more example. I would ask David to say everything he said before and ditto all of that. He knows some of the history, and Honer has been in the newspaper speaking about the history. This isn't something that just needs to randomly be done. And I hope that we don't go into more 480s and spend the next 3 or 4 years on election after election after election to get the people's voice in, which may or may not agree with your voice. What the people in Glenwood want for Glenwood is that it stops being raped and pillaged.
Thank you.
That was the last on my list. Is there anyone here who would also like to speak? We'll do Jennifer Vanian, and I don't think I know your name, so let's, okay. Jennifer, come on up.
Good evening, Jennifer Vanian, 1016 Minter. Thanks for letting me speak. Well, starting with over on 6th, the landing, we had, I think, at least 3 big demonstrations with the big boards, and people got to have an idea of what was going to happen there. And then nothing happened, but I'm just curious why that's not happening now. This project seems to not have much public you only have people from Cowden, and it really should have a whole room full of people from the entire town having an opinion on it, and I think most people don't know about it. And my thought is that if you give this first piece of land away, I saw on the agenda tonight that you have the confluence as having a no vote. And personally, I just feel like there should be a vote on that, because that's a pretty special piece of property in the city. I feel like it's very important for tourism, for mental health, for a growing city that even needs places for strawberry days in the future. I would just like to see a little more communication from the city on projects like this. And a piece of property that the city owns, in my opinion, should go to a vote if it's going to be given away or sold before that happens.
Yep, and go ahead and just say your name and if you're in city limits.
My name is Pat Helling. I live on 2522 Woodbury Drive. I'm just against this project mainly because of the ingress, the egress. And it's just the wrong project in the wrong place. So there's no need for me to repeat what everybody else has said, and I also feel the same, that Glenwood has had enough development. It just has been going on and on and on. And we do have to think about what's going to happen if we have a fire. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. And it's a little unusual to do this, but I am gonna turn it back to our city attorney. Oh, we have online? Before I do that, let's just double check. Oh, it looks like Gary Vick. Do we have any other names besides Gary Vick lit up? Okay, so I am gonna ask that those that are online, raise your hand if you would like to speak. And we will start right now with Gary Vick. Gary, go ahead and tell us your address or if you're in city limits, and keep to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I do live within the city limits. I think most of us generally support Habitat for Humanity. But what I want to talk about tonight are the deed restrictions that they're using, because I think they're at odds with the city code and the strategic housing plan. Let me start by looking at Aspen. When you purchase a subsidized home in Aspen, you must hold and retain, those last two words are important, and retain a job in the city. If you change jobs outside of Aspen, you're forced to sell your property back to the governing authority, and you can do so for a 3% per annum appreciation on your investment. This does two things. It keeps the housing affordable for future buyers, and it makes sure housing is occupied by members of the local workforce. Now, let's look at what Habitat Humanity is doing. They are doing neither of these things with their deed restrictions. To qualify for a purchase at 8th and Midland, you must first work in Glenwood or the 81601 area code, but then you are free to change jobs at any time so long as you remain in the corridor that runs between Silt and Aspen. Because we all change jobs probably a dozen times in our careers, I can assure you that over a few years, very few of those people who initially worked in Glenwood will still be doing so. This is not the way to house workforce for the long term. But it gets worse, because when the owners sell a Habitat home, they do so not only at the 3% appreciation that Aspen gets, but they do 3% plus a cost of living adjustments. So they are outrunning market conditions by 3%. Now, they're going to start below market, but it is a mathematical certainty. And I got a lot of degrees behind my name here. I can tell you it's a mathematical certainty that these homes will be market priced down the road. So at the end of the day, what you end up with is a project for forever homes in which not everyone, in fact, perhaps very few people work in the city, and you have not preserved a low price environment for workers to come into and purchase. This is not the goal of Glenwood's Workforce Housing Code or the Strategic Housing Plan. I'm getting a little short on time, but I will refer you to section 7045-100, which says of the city code, which said that anything in the workforce housing part of the code shall be deed restricted to ownership and occupancy by persons who live in the city. And as I said, you can change jobs at any time from Habitat. I have a lot more to say, but we'll take it another time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it. We have now, we've heard from the crowd. We've heard online. Is there anyone before I close public comment that would like to speak? Okay, then I'm going to close it. I am going to turn it to our city attorney for any clarification on this property and any
Sure.
other observations.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to actually walk through unfortunately, I've been around a long time, so I filed the petition on behalf of, in condemnation on behalf of the city. At the time, we actually only wanted to acquire a portion of this property. It was the narrow strip on which the sidewalk in 8th Street and the corner of Midland was ultimately constructed. And if you refer to those court documents, both the petition and the amended petition refer to a parcel A and B, and a request in that petition for condemnation that parcel A be used and fully owned by the city for those right-of-way purposes. We were seeking only a temporary construction easement on the remainder parcel. Many people here probably know Bill DeWinter. I actually had the good fortune of trying the last case against Bill DeWinter on this particular case. He represented the owners of the Collins at the time. First hearing on this matter was in May of 2005, and we went to a hearing on whether or not there was the petition and condemnation for immediate possession was necessary. We were trying to get the project started. At that hearing in the courtroom, we stipulated, because the Collins did not want to retain the remainder parcel, that we would take both the original parcel A, that strip that we did need for transportation purposes, as well as parcel B. We stipulated to that in front of Judge Craven. And ultimately then the only issue left to be decided between the city and the Collins at the time was the valuation of the property. We tried that matter before 3 landowners from Garfield County, which is one of the choices you have underneath the the statutory Title 38. I want to say, I can't remember the third. It was David McConaughey, Bruce Robinson. If you remember Bruce, when he was the president of Alpine Bank, and I can't, for the life of me, it's been 20 years almost. I can't remember who the other commissioner was that we tried that in front of. Valuation was determined and a final order was issued in November of 2005. We took title as to those 2 parcels as parcel A and B, and that's reflected in the order of immediate possession. So the city's intent from the standpoint of the petition and condemnation was always we needed that 1 parcel for transportation, and we stipulated to take the other parcel as just part of the proceedings.
Mhm.
So from that standpoint, that property has not been used by the city. After construction was completed, we did use it for temporary construction purposes. And as was pointed out by one of the speakers, it has been not used for anything else since that time. When you look at the tax rolls, I think this is an important thing to understand too. Garfield County is one of those counties that if you are a public entity, they list it as a non-taxed property regardless of what it is or what its use is, if it's owned by the city of Glenwood Springs or the fire district or the school district or whatever. So if you look at the current property listing, there's about 122 listings underneath the city of Glenwood Springs. All of those are tax exempt. The charter in section 13.2 lists 4 categories that you need to go to a public vote on. Obviously, the drafters of the charter recognize that there were more categories than that, that you wouldn't have to go to a vote on, or else they would have just said all property has to go to a vote. So the question is whether or not it's been used for a governmental purpose, which is the language in the charter. If you look to other case law on that issue, governmental purposes are much like parcel A, transportation purposes. Could be for a city hall, could be for an MOC, could be for sewer works, could be for water works. But even inside of that, you as council have the ability over time to decide what you're going to use that land for. And sort of the seminal case in Colorado is an Estes Park case in 2008, where the Court of Appeals recognized that property that was acquired by Estes Park for purposes of a municipal operations center or a town hall never was actually used for that purpose, that it could be sold without going to an election and very similar provisions to what we have here. And the reason is because it was never committed to that governmental or public purpose, which is the same thing we have going on with this parcel. And they relied in that decision on another case in which the determination was that even if you condemned for a public purpose, if you never actually put it to that public purpose, it still could be sold separate and apart. And so from that standpoint, I think that entire history, it's important to note that there were two very separate things we were trying to achieve there. And that frankly, as a matter of convenience in 2005, standing in a courtroom, we stipulated to taking that second parcel because honestly, the city at the time wanted that to remain with the property owner. They had had a development application that had laid fallow for a while for I think 12 units that had been originally approved on that parcel. Fast forward to 2019, we engaged in a very comprehensive study in Glenwood as to what public properties we could potentially use for housing, recognizing that was becoming a critical need. This was one of the properties that was identified. City put out an RFP for developers. Habitat for Humanity was the only developer that responded. Council negotiated an agreement with Habitat for Humanity and they moved forward. I believe this particular parcel, and Hannah can correct me if I'm wrong, I think has had 3 design charrettes conducted in and around what it was going to be. In addition to the ones that are you're required to go through a neighborhood meeting as part of the development review process. That ultimately was decided at the Planning Commission fairly recently. So from a process standpoint, that's a whole bunch of history as to the history of that parcel, the development review process, the process we went through with Habitat for Humanity. All of those things were done at public meetings over since in terms of this particular parcel for this purpose between 2019 and 2023. Thanks.
Thank you, Carl. You know, in reflecting both the comments that you all made this evening, as well as what I know of the history of this, I know how hard a change in your community, any neighborhood, it does impact you. Of the people who spoke this evening, only 3 of you, this is not your backyard. That's it. This is 3 of you are coming from the community saying that this doesn't align with you. The rest of you will be deeply impacted by this. And we are not insensitive to that. We recognize that. We hear your concerns. And I think that all of us have asked questions. There has been Carl's been wonderful about giving us like the historical vernacular of what exactly kind of a summary of what just went down. Crossing T's and dotting I's on public process is incredibly important to everyone up here. We're not sneaky people. We wanted you to know what was happening. There were opportunities. You bring up good points, and nothing that anybody said this evening was not without merit, because it will impact you. At the same time, we have had a process that vetted this parcel. And the process, big picture, aligns with a lot of our goals, which I hear that maybe you guys don't agree with everything I'm saying, but I guess where we're at with this is that we appreciate that you all came here this evening. We have heard your concerns. We'll bring them back here. There are other steps in this process to get a final approval for the application and permitting. There will be other opportunities. There was one comment that I want to dispel, and that is that historically we did a code change in 2018 that made it so that it would be an administrative review that could approve this. And within our community development office, Hannah, who is our director of community development, elected because of the feedback to make sure that we vetted it through planning and zoning, because that's their skill set, is asking questions, community engagement. So we chose to do that. She chose to do that route, and I could not agree with her more that that was the process. There was opportunity at that point for public comment. There's this, you could come back in 2 weeks and continue to give us feedback. There are outlets for you guys to be heard, and we hear you. We we will be moving forward on this is my understanding. But like I said, there's other opportunities that before it's finally approved, where you can give feedback. Safety concerns, go ahead.
I actually, the final plans process on this, I just to.
Yeah.
I don't
Thank
mean to
you.
correct you, Madam
No.
Mayor, but that's an administrative process. It's just making sure that the
Oh.
engineered plans align with the
Thank you.
development review that has occurred.
Thank you. Okay.
So,
There
I
is
mean,
one more
final-
process, but.
yeah,
uh-huh.
but it's not actually, it's literally making sure that the conditions on the
Okay.
approval match up with the plans that are being submitted.
Great.
So the decision of the planning commission was final.
Okay.
The time period for appealing that decision ran, I think, the day before the last council
Thank
meeting,
you.
so about 2.5 weeks
Yep.
ago. So just they're really from a development review standpoint, the process is
Is
complete,
complete. Mhm.
right?
However, I will say that I think that some of the feedback on the surrounding area for safety, we hear your concerns, we appreciate them, and we're so grateful you came this evening. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to look for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Except for the item that was pulled off.
Item H. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. We will move on to actions and or presentations. Our first item is item 10, 27th Street Underpass Update.
Sorry, we just need to get our technology up.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is Ben Ludlow. I am the project manager for the Roaring Fork Transportation Authority for the 27th Street Underpass. With me, I have Tracy Truelove, who is our project information manager for that project. And we're going to give you an update on the 27th Street Underpasses project. Tracy, go ahead.
Now I don't know how to advance it.
We're going to
Do you know
attempt
how
to
to-
do
This is a great slide.
Oh. Sorry.
You did it.
Yeah, what did you type? Yeah, I stopped. Yeah, that makes me nervous. All right. Well, we just need it on this one. We'll give it a shot. All right. So we were gonna jump right into all the channels we have set up for public information. We've been, I think this is our third or fourth time visiting you for an update. Third. And I also will start off mentioning that this was a tough week for us. Anytime we have a new project and a new change, it's gonna cause some disruption, and it did. And our team recognized that, but our team went right to the public safety aspect of what we were seeing out there. I'll also share, though, that I have a strong and long working relationship with your PIO. I think is one of the best and has done a tremendous job here in the city of Glenwood. And we appreciate that she's part of our team. You know, that's what happens when we do these multi-agency projects. And so Brianna jumped to it and got some good information out. And at the same time, our team was working at where we can make some adjustments and fill some holes. And in doing that, we are working with Gina Sheldrake, who's a local graphic designer. She's the gal that created our entire brand for the Grand Avenue Bridge, as well as the Rafter project. And moving forward, Gina's able to update all of our channels too. So there's just a lot of things that we can improve on, and we recognize that. But I also think Ben's going to talk a little bit about how it takes time for projects to kind of get into a battle rhythm, is like how I talked about it. It takes people a while to look at other ways to get around a project. And we know that this is going to be impactful, and we have another round coming here pretty soon. We have 114 people that have signed up through our website. I think a lot of you are on that list. So I think what I would ask is that we continue to find ways to get more people to sign up. There's never enough opportunities to ask your constituents to give us their email. We're not using it for anything more than pushing alerts. Do you want to talk a little bit about the?
Sure, yes, we had obviously changes to our traffic flow this week. We changed up Valley traffic to the 27th Street intersection, and that takes some time for people to adjust to those changes. One of the reasons we had to only changed the up valley traffic is so we could remove an existing signal pole. And then today we installed a new temporary signal pole. So now we are moving towards shifting the down valley traffic. With moving traffic, as we've seen on multiple projects before, you have the adjustment time for the commuters to learn different routes to go, patience, how traffic patterns move throughout the intersection. There's always going to be a day or two change. Today, I viewed the traffic has actually gotten better on 27th Street. Incrementally each day, we see less and less backups. And even the down valley traffic, I looked at it just before we came up on the maps. It's not backed all the way up to County Road 154 today. There's actually a gap there, which is nice. So our goal here is to help the commuter traffic get through at a better pace than we were on Monday, and to try and make improvements with, adjustments that we can do as the project moves along. I also want to just say the support that we, RAFTA, have from you, the City of Glenwood Springs, and your staff is incredible. We're all owners in this project together, and I'm very proud to work with Ryan Gordon and Matt Langhorst and Brianna on this project. We talk, if it's not daily, it's almost daily, on different aspects and issues and problems and how we can get through those. And so I just wanted to thank you and your staff for your support for this project.
I did want to mention there was quite a bit of outreach ahead of the switch. And we actually walked that corridor. We walked that corridor several times actually throughout this project so far. And again, people have the option to opt in. I think, as all of you remember, I think most of you were here for Grand Avenue Bridge. A lot of times until something's impacted you, you aren't paying the same level of attention. We probably had about 20 new people sign up. So that's fantastic. But again, I would ask for your continued support on how we message people getting involved with the information, because we have a really robust program to provide that. Probably the one thing I would do different was actually put in a text alert system, but we are hoping we don't have to have those kinds of challenges here in the future, especially with the full detour in place and the traffic switch in place.
I'm going to dig right into traffic impacts right now and just some updates on upcoming month for everyone. Right now we have, as everyone's seen, a safety closure for the left-hand turn movement from down valley traffic onto 27th Street. This is due to the gap in the roadway between up valley and down valley traffic. When we opened that up on Monday, we created a gridlock situation, an unsafe situation with vehicles crossing the up valley traffic lanes during a red light. It was just a train wreck. It was a mess. I was very proud of my team for making that decision to close that. Between the contractor and our engineering firm overseeing that, I thought that was a great move. Coming forward now, I don't know if anyone was out there today, but we set another signal pole, removed the signal pole yesterday. We finished paving the area for a detour. We're going to continue to work for the next week on setting up our signals, temporary signals for the detour pavement. And hopefully, without any delays, which we don't see whether affecting us, we're working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week right now. We will have the down valley shift completed by the end of next week. And we will have the 27th Street left-hand turn lane open back up to traffic.
That's okay. You did it.
County Road 154. So we had a big backup on County Road 154. Everyone who wants to hit the Buffalo Valley light to bypass the project. I even did it yesterday and totally forgot about it. We found a problem with the signal there. The signal wasn't identifying traffic in the left-hand lane, the left-hand turn lane on every sequence. And so we contacted CDOT about that yesterday. Josh Cohen from CDOT went out and observed it. We had David Oldham from Region 3 Traffic out here today watching traffic. So we have now adjusted that signal. We've added more time to that left-hand turn lane between the hours of 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. to clear that area out. We had a very dangerous situation there. Luckily, because we created gridlock, it wasn't high-speed dangerous, but traffic was backed up in that left-hand turn pocket and up around the corner in the left-hand traffic lane. And so we're going to see that. We also have contacted the tunnel. They changed the variable message board just before you get to Carbondale at 133 to warn everyone that you can't make a left-hand turn at 27th Street, you alternate routes, and also watch for backup traffic. In addition, we have moved the variable message board that we had right at the Buffalo Valley light which I still laugh, we call it Buffalo Valley because I've been there forever. And we moved that variable message board back about a half mile or so further to warn everyone, slow traffic ahead and 27th Street, left-hand turn is not available and to use alternate traffic.
We also were working with Hanging Lake Tunnel to get the CDOT big boards also putting out the same information that we are, just so we're getting a few more hits. And that's another thing. There were several VMS boards last week out that were, letting people know this was coming.
One of the things we've done during construction this week, and we had talked about this prior, that we were going to have to see what happened once we did this first detour. We didn't know what the reaction from the traveling public would be. So after the first day, we went, okay, this is a mess. So in the meantime, we have on the morning commute coming out 27th Street, we have added flaggers at the roundabout to help people if there's a gridlock situation to say, I'm not going to, hey, which way are you going? You're going up valley, you're going down valley, take this route, avoid the areas to keep the roundabout open. So we have a few flaggers down there. We also have a situation now at 27th, when you turn on the 82, there's no longer an acceleration lane. So when you come up there to make a right hand on red, you can't just pull out because there's no acceleration lane. We have a flagger in the morning who stands there to help encourage people to make that turn once traffic is clear.
Again, there's lots of ways to connect with the project. There's one more person I'd like to shout out to that I believe sits on your transportation commission, but I've got Ray Alexander on speed dial. I've had Ray Alexander on speed dial since I'm even sitting back in that Glenwood Canyon PIO seat, because that Roaring Fork Road and Weather Board is extremely active, not always very nice, but extremely active. And I think that's another thing I just like to share is our flaggers are working very hard out there. And we are seeing a lot of activity that is risky and on cell phones, and I get it. But I think our team put safety at the top of what we're doing, and it's unfortunately going to impact people and frustrate people a little bit, but we're going to always do that. And I think you would encourage us to do that as well. For anybody on the line that's listening or in the crowd, if you go to the website, which is 27thstreetproject.com, you can sign up there to get all the information. And what we try to do is give you a look ahead to the week that's coming, so you can plan accordingly, or you can adjust your schedule. Because I think unless folks get back around that idea, you're going to sit, pretty frustrated at times when we have, a tremendous amount of work coming. And I always say it's that short-term pain for long-term gain. This safety improvement for Glenwood is a huge deal. I used to live on 33rd Street. I had little kids. I would not let them cross over 82 at lights because it just scared me. And now they're grown, they're in college. Great. I think I'd still be worried if there weren't these, underpass pedestrian tunnels going in. So I think we have to keep that message out there for people even experiencing the frustration. Brianna and I are part of a very active public information team. I will be shooting more information out to our local communities, our commuter communities, and have them get more people hopefully signing up. But again, we're going to get through it, but we have to kind of, I think, buoy each other in it because it's not easy. So anything else you want to?
I'd also like to thank Chief and staff for having an increased enforcement out there for the 25-mile-an-hour speed zone. There's 4 to 5 people pull over every day in the morning when I'm there, and I'm very thankful for specifically for our construction workers, but even more for the pedestrians who still choose to cross there. It is a dangerous situation. No matter what we say, we speak to them individually, they still do it. I saw an 8-year-old girl today, right before we came over there. I just want to thank you for your increased efforts.
Thank you, Chief. We're welcome to questions. Yeah. Anybody have questions this evening? Oh, Counselor Godus, go ahead and there we go.
Yeah, and thank you guys. I think this project is absolutely needed. My daughter has to navigate the McDonald's crosswalk nearly daily as she goes to her job on her bike. So I think the community absolutely is going to appreciate this when it's done. I do have some questions and a few comments. When I go to your webpage and I click on traffic impacts, the only thing that comes up is the page is completely blank other than a link back to see our news page. And when I click on see our news page, it's a press release from 3 months ago. So it's not super useful. And then when I click on RAFTA service alerts, find your bus, plan a trip, sign up for RAFTA alerts and more. I was hoping to sign up for RAFTA alerts for this project. It's on the project page and it just takes me to rafta.com. So trying to figure out, and then when I sign up for your newsletter or try to sign up, you know, I would really encourage you to do the text messaging and real-time alerts for texting and email. We had that with South Midland, and there was so many times that those came out. Not maybe, I don't know, you're probably signed up, but weekly. Yeah, well, but weekly I'd get a text like, oh, don't forget, today we're doing a lane shift. Or, hey, because back ordered of this part or this material couldn't get in, we're delaying this closure. We would get those, I would say, once a week throughout the entire project. And it wasn't just a newsletter I got on a Monday, and we just hope the public would remember it for the rest of the week when something is happening. So I'd really, really encourage you to look at text, letting people and having a system sign up for text alerts and emails. I think, you know, I brought up 6 months ago that this was going to get backed up to both roundabouts, and it has. It's really, really difficult, and it's going to be really hellish in next month when kids go back to school in less than a month. I've not seen yet a flagger at either roundabout, and I've seen people take a left-hand turn into the roundabout, the mini roundabout, to get past that traffic. I've seen people go up on the apron. And I was told at that time, we have a very healthy budget for flaggers, for traffic control. And so great that we have a guy at the actual intersection, but we need that traffic control, and we need those flaggers on at least the mini roundabout. You know, I think that whatever we can do when conditions change, the left-hand turn lights onto 27th Street, that's not going to be a one-time thing in the next 18 months. We're going to have things that are going to happen when it snows, when school's in, if a bus is delayed. We're going to have a lot of these things. So I think it's absolutely critical that one, the website is useful to some degree, and the two, that we get text alerts and email alerts so we have real-time information.
Thank you, Councilor Gotis. Councilor Zelinski.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in the same neighborhood, so I have similar concerns and observations as feel for the people that live in the terraces. I know I see people daily cutting through their parking lot because we get jammed up, and I don't know that there's anything you guys can do about that, but I think it's worth mentioning Chief Darris and you know, maybe if you can get a crew down there. I think it's just really in that first early morning commute time, and then probably less so in the evening, because they just take a right and they go up, and we can get back in a little bit more easily. But my question was about the left-hand turns onto 27th Street. Is the preferred alternative to kind of go up, I don't know, is that South Glen by Walmart there, and then come straight down 27th Street? Or are you encouraging traffic to bounce off at Buffalo Valley there?
Or to go to 23rd Street.
23rd Street.
23rd Street's the
23rd
preferred?
Is the preference, but the turn pocket at 23rd Street is small. It's
I
a
know.
Much larger pocket at Buffalo Valley, and since we have increased that light time, that's.
So Buffalo Valley be the, okay. Because people ask me,
And to add to that, you know, we're not just increasing that time for, you know, the rest of this month. We're going to increase that time for the duration of the project.
okay.
In addition, and I failed to mention this, David Olden from CDOT is looking at, everyone knows the signals that run through Glenwood have a sequence where they're all tied together to try and clear traffic more. So he's looking at 23rd Street down to see if there's any adjustments they can make. We have noticed, I really noticed it on Monday when I was there, that because of the 23rd Street light, it was creating basically a gridlock between 23rd and 27th. So then 27th couldn't clear through also. So we've brought this up with CDOT, and they want to, you know, their lights, they're in charge of how that works. Priority is Highway 82, not the side streets. We try everything we can to get more time on the side streets. And it's a challenge, but you know,
Yeah.
you got to move the 27,000 vehicles through.
Understood. I know, I appreciate the work you're doing, and I don't doubt that you're giving every consideration that is possible. I mean, I'm with everybody else. Like, I advocated huge for this project. I think it's vital. I hate, you know, there's been lots of light to that corner. It's not, and it's only going to get worse. So it is necessary, and I will preach to anybody that wants to complain, so you can send it my way.
Go ahead and preach to Jonathan.
I was just gonna say, if we don't know, and we travel this a lot, and if the general public doesn't know to turn left at Buffalo Valley, to go up to Walmart and then go straight to turn left at 23rd Street, or to hypothetically go down 8th Street and come back, that's why we need real-time text alerts.
We just don't want to, we don't want to encourage. We don't want to encourage people to go a certain route. We like them to find the route that works best. for them.
And that's great, but not giving people the option or saying, here's 3 different options that you can do, but that here's one you can't do. If people just don't know that they can't turn at 27th and 23rd is totally gridlocked, it's going to create confusion. It's going to create accidents. And so I think more communication and more timely communication is going to be really key to alleviating a lot of people's stress and anxiety. Because these aren't, at least in the evening, it's not necessarily, a lot of these aren't our neighborhood. It's not necessarily even Glenwood Springs resident. It's through traffic that's trying to negotiate all the people trying to get into our neighborhood, into a Red Mountain area. So I can't encourage enough that giving people more information and trusting them to have a good idea of how they use that information is more important.
Thank you, Counselor Godus. Thank you, guys. We appreciate you bringing this in front of us, and thanks for your continued diligence in communicating with our community and working towards making it safer.
See you in a month.
Yep, we appreciate you both. Okay. We're going to move on to strategic housing plan update. Who is our presenter? Hello.
That will be yours truly. I'm going to tee up a short presentation here and introduce it more fully.
For those online, this is Watkins.
I was getting to that. Okay, I'm sharing my screen now. My name is Watkins Fulgray. I'm a planner with the city. I'm going to be doing just a real brief presentation to introduce this topic, and then I'm going to turn it over to our consultants who are online. We're making them panelists, and they will give you guys a real full presentation about the strategic housing plan update. So as a little bit of backgrounds, we have a 2010 plan, strategic housing plan, which is being updated here. 2010 was a while ago, so we think that it's time to update it. And we got some state funding to do that. We have some requirements that the state's put on us for how we go about that, and a timeline that the state has imposed. The requirements, well, first I'll say that you all have the authority to adopt this plan. Planning and Zoning Commission also heard a presentation and recommended adoption from you all, but City Council, you all are the adopting authority. And so what we're doing tonight is that the consultants are going to present the plan, answer any kind of technical questions. I expect there'll be some back and forth with you all and with the public. We do recommend that City Council pass the resolution that would adopt the plan and replace the 2010 plan. And then we will also be in the future, and this is not an action item for tonight, but in the future, we will be bringing forward some potential code changes that are from this list of qualifying strategies. This list, and we can get into it if you all would like, but this is a list that the state prepared. This is one of the terms of our grant from the state that pays for this update, that we make a good faith effort to adopt at least one of these 16 qualifying strategies. Many of these we already do have on our books, but we will be looking to adopt at least one more of these. So as I mentioned, we're recommending that you all approve and adopt the strategic housing plan update. Some alternatives, if you all don't want to do this, you could adopt the plan update with some changes, or you could not adopt it if you choose to. So with that, I don't think there's any questions from me. Please let me know if there is. I'm going to turn it over to our consultants who are online.
Thank you, Watkins.
All right. Thank you, Watkins. Madam Mayor and members of council, good evening. It's good to be with you. My name is Andrew Knutson, and with me is my colleague, Carson Bryant. We are with Economic and Planning Systems, and we are a land use land use economics consulting firm. Our office is based in Denver, and I'm the managing principal there. We've had an office there for 22, 23 years. And from that location, we do quite a bit of work on the Western Slope. And in fact, we do quite a bit of work in Glenwood historically, as well as the Roaring Fork, Eagle County, Garfield County, Mesa County. We certainly know the territory in Glenwood and the surrounding environments. Just by way of background, we're active in approximately a dozen plus mountain resort communities engaged on affordable housing topics today. I mean, that's our active clients around affordable housing and mountain resorts. We also advise communities across the country. Affordable housing was often a unique to communities like Glenwood, and now it's everywhere. And so we find that our practice and people seeking out our services related to affordable housing, East Coast, West Coast, the whole 9 yards. Just a little bit of background on us. We do emphasize quite a bit of our understanding of public sector and private sector needs. About 2/3 of our client base are public, 1/3 are private. We understand how on the public side, data can inform decisions to advance policy goals. We also understand on the private side what it takes to go vertical on any given real estate project. And so we have sensitivity to both and advise communities specifically on ways to advance policy that generates traction in the market and ultimately leverages the resources of both public and private. The last thing I'll say about EPS, and then we'll speed things up. We've got about 20, 25 slides for you tonight, and we'll try to keep our part short so we can listen to you. Is that we do also have a partner, RRC Associates. They helped us with the data related to the housing needs assessment. We'll get into that at the end of our presentation. With that, you can see on the agenda on the slide in front of you today, if you can go back one real quick, we're going to be talking about the purpose for the strategic plan update. We'll also talk about each of the 5 areas in detail that you see on the screen in front of you, and talk about the data behind it and where we're recommending the city move forward on each of these. And then the final part of the presentation will be that needs assessment, where we go through a lot of detailed data. So maintain energy there. It's easy to let eyes glaze over, but that data are important because they form the basis of the recommendations. One bit on process, if you want to hit the next slide. Starting on the left side of the screen, you can see that there was an open house with 2 sessions, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. Very well attended, standing room only. I mean, we were packed in there, staff, elected officials, several of the council members were there at the time. Members that were on council at the time attended these workshops. Lots of people, lots of engagement, lots of conversation. We also hosted a workshop with P&Z, Housing Commission, and City Council members in June. And we went through the plan in detail and had 2 hours to generate conversation about it. We also used a Mentimeter process in that work session. The results you can see on the right side of the screen. It was a Mentimeter is a tool that people use their digital device, their phones, to be able to tap into a website and then vote on different things. It's an efficient way to see where there's consensus and where there's differences. And you can see, for example, the very first question we asked, how high a priority is the development of city-owned vacant land for housing? Very high level of consensus. This was our first Mentimeter for the afternoon, and it was nice to see that so many people were on the same page. That work session also very well attended across all of these groups, including council, P&Z, and the Housing Commission. We can get into more of the Mentimeter results. We've got all of them included at the very end. Our purpose tonight is not to go through those. Our purpose is mainly to communicate to members of council and the community and those participating through the television tonight that the ideas that are presented tonight have been well vetted by the community. Finally, in terms of the purpose, we're talking about building on work that was started in 2010 with that strategic housing plan. And we want to recognize a lot of the activities that have occurred and that the council has taken since that time. Housing is a critical issue, and there have been many accomplishments that the city has achieved, not the least of which is the lodging tax, the 2C funds that were approved recently. That's huge. Not every community can have the electorate understand the pressing issue that housing represents and vote yes in that voting booth. and or mail-in ballot, so to speak, and ultimately adopt a revenue stream. So lots of work, and we want to acknowledge that a lot of this work has been done by past leaders in the city as well as the current council. So that's a little bit of background. And with that, my colleague Carson is going to walk through the specific policy tools that we were recommending be included in the strategy.
Great. Yeah. So I'm going to go through the different policy tools. First, I'll cover what each one is and why we included it. And then we'll go through some recommendations for each of these policy tools. So the first policy tool is the use of vacant land for housing development, specifically vacant city-owned land. And this is a crucial asset for accommodating future housing development. City-owned land is beneficial because it makes projects that have an affordable component more feasible, right? When the land is at a discount, it makes development of units more financially realistic. And because it's city-owned land, the city can define key criteria for development. So things like affordability, things like desired product type, how dense the proposed project should be, community benefits, and whether or not the land should be leased or sold. And it's also really important to have a formal and transparent public-private partnership or P3 process. You want to make sure that you can meaningfully advance the city's goals of expanding affordable housing, but also ensuring that you can actually attract developers and it's an attractive enough project. So our recommendations for development on city-owned vacant land is, first of all, identify the parcels that are the highest near-term priority. Staff has identified the Vogelaar site as one of those priorities and have conducted additional research to inform which parcels are best suited for housing development. And for each of these parcels, describe the key characteristics and what kind of development is desired on them. What kind of density, whether it's for sale or for rent, what affordability levels, and whether it should be sold or leased to a prospective developer. And then with this, establish a request for proposals framework that have clear criteria for the proposed development. So if someone wants to develop on it, what do they need to include in order to actually get approved? And you know, a big part of this work is cultivating relationships with prospective developers to make sure you have people actually respond to that RFP process and show interest in a housing development. And then as needed, identify additional incentives that a project on city-owned land might need. You know, with construction costs going up, it very well may be the case that a project, even with land, would need additional incentives. And then lastly, as appropriate, the city should think about maintaining or creating and maintaining some form of ownership of the housing built on city-owned land where appropriate. So moving on to preservation. So thinking about preservation broadly here. So rising prices and rents have made it really difficult and put a lot of pressure on a lot of residents in Glenwood. The housing market is very tight, and our data has definitely confirmed that. And preservation helps stabilize those current residents. So it's critical to preserve existing units, especially those that are relatively more affordable and where people currently live. And this is an especially effective use of limited city resources. It can be less expensive to preserve an existing unit than to build a new unit, especially where costs have been in recent years. So our recommendations around preservation, first and foremost, prioritize mobile home preservation. This was identified as a priority in the work session last month. And Glenwood has several mobile home parks that constitute what we might call a naturally occurring affordable housing stock. So a couple of big things here. One, expand information on the current inventory. So who's living there? What are the income levels of the residents? What is the potential of a park for being redeveloped and residents getting displaced as a result of that? And then implement programs that help stabilize residents. So things like land use overlays, things like financial support for enabling residents to purchase their mobile home park. This is something that has garnered a lot of state resources and legislation in recent years, and is definitely a viable avenue to preserve these parks. And things like infrastructure support and legal support can also go a long way for residents. Consider something like motel conversions. Recent code has made it easier to convert motels to affordable housing and work through the different models of that. Community land trusts are a potential avenue for preservation. So think about whether or not that's appropriate, and whether you want to partner with an existing community land trust, either in the valley or one that works statewide, or form one locally. Community land trusts can be a very effective way to preserve the affordability of housing over the long run. And then in the plan, we note other long-term preservation approaches, things like rental assistance, things like home repair loans and grants that aren't as high of a priority, but nonetheless could serve a purpose in the long run. And then think about how much these actions around preservation cost. So think about where the money is coming from and how it would be used. So the next tool is a density bonus. And so why are we thinking about a density bonus? So it provides the market with an avenue to deliver more units while requiring relatively minimal investment from the city. And it's an effective way to utilize existing land without growing outward, especially when traffic is a growing problem, and it's important to incentivize development that's near public transportation that reduces those traffic impacts. And there are two main approaches to density bonus that we talk about in the plan. One is allowing more units on lots in residential neighborhoods, so upzoning, and then increasing allowable density in larger multifamily projects on major corridors. So two different approaches there. I'll summarize the recommendations here in a second. And then identifying clear parameters. So what does someone need to do in order to achieve a density bonus? So taking the current density bonus language and updating it to be more specific. And so our recommendations are as follows here. So the first thing is update the zoning code to enable up to 3 units on lots currently zoned for single unit housing. But for those additional units, requiring deed restrictions on them. So in exchange for more density in those neighborhoods, you're requiring something. And those deed restrictions can range from things like resident occupancy to requirements around local employment to income limits. That's ultimately up to council and staff to decide, but definitely considering deed restrictions with that kind of action. And then when a major development occurs on commercial corridors, think about opportunities to increase development potential. And a big part of that is updating the code to define affordability parameters that are required to receive a density bonus. So what will a developer have to do in terms of affordability to get those extra units? And then consider a density bonus that might apply to residential projects below the 10-unit threshold set by the current inclusionary housing ordinance. And lastly, clearly define what the other parameters for a density bonus is and how a development might be able to achieve it, whether those are changes in dimensional standards or changes in parking or changes in height. Moving on to funding sources here. Funding is a really critical way to expand housing programs and implement a lot of these tools. With 2C passing in 2012, that's generating about $1.5 million, 1.5 million for the city in additional revenue that's dedicated to housing specifically. But beyond this, there are other state and local funding sources that are possible for the city to implement and to leverage. And so one of our key recommendations here is not only determine how to most effectively allocate revenue from 2C, but also think about how the city can leverage state funding sources for affordable housing. There are a lot of these state sources that have been made available recently, especially after Proposition 123 has passed. Statewide, that's bringing in about $300 million annually for affordable housing. And the communities that can get out front of it can definitely access a lot of those resources and look at other state programs that have been made available in recent years. And then plan for the next 5 or so years about what local sources the city can use and how those can be leveraged against the state and even federal sources to implement a lot of these programs and policy tools. So another policy tool that was of interest to people in this was buy downs. And what is a buy down? A buy down is basically when a public entity, so a city or a housing authority, pays a homeowner to place a deed restriction on their property. And typically the purpose of that deed restriction is to maintain or is to ensure that that housing is lived in by locals and is, in certain cases, offered at a relatively affordable rate. And there are a lot of different parameters around a buy-down program, and I'll get into two examples here, two successful examples from elsewhere in the state. So Vail has a pretty robust buy-down program. They offer it in exchange for a deed restriction that requires both local residency and local employment. There's no appreciation cap on the deed restriction, nor are there income limits. And there's no concrete formula for how they determine the amount of the buy down, but typically it's between 15 and 20% of fair market value. And in times when the market's hotter, like in 2020 and 2021, that percentage was closer to 20 to 23%, as we understand. And this has been used to buy down a lot of properties, both in Vail and throughout Eagle County. And then in Breckenridge, they have a somewhat similar program. They offer two tiers of deed restrictions. One, which is at that 15 to 20% of value amount, requires local residency and local employment. And then there's a heavier deed restriction category, which is typically 20 to 30% of value, which not only requires residency and employment, but also puts a 3% annual appreciation cap on properties that have received buy downs. And this is also not formulaic. It's ultimately done on a case-by-case basis that changes with the market.
And if I can interject here, the buy downs are a particularly effective tool in land constrained communities. I mean, certainly Vail, Breckenridge are land constrained, as is Glenwood. Glenwood is very land constrained. So it's a good tool to have in the toolkit. It is not cheap, and there's economies of scale that can be achieved in construction of multi-unit properties that you don't get when you're purchasing units individually. So while it's not the most efficient use of dollars, it can be a very good use of dollars in land constrained environments like Glenwood Springs.
Yeah. Great. So those were the policy tools, and I'm going to talk about the needs assessment, and I'll try to go through this as clearly as possible. There's definitely a lot of data here. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to write them down and ask us once we're done presenting here. So just a quick housing market snapshot to contextualize this housing needs assessment. So Glenwood Springs has just over 4,000 housing units. That inventory has grown about 5% total since 2010. So it hasn't really grown at that quickly of a rate, but nonetheless, new units are being built. Other things like short-term rentals, for example, have become more common recently. According to the most recent data, there are about 108 registered short-term rentals in Glenwood, which is about 2.5% of the overall housing inventory. And then we also looked into vacant and second homes. There are about 150 of those, which is about 3.5% of total housing inventory. So this needs assessment has several key components. Before I go into each of those, the first thing I want to emphasize is that this needs assessment reflects policy priorities and policy goals. And these goals are ultimately subject to council's, so you all's discretion. And I want to emphasize that when I'm going through this, think about if these are goals that you agree with or you think are good. And so
there's also another part of the analysis, the strategy. When we do these strategies for communities, there's a component around economic vitality. How do we create housing linked to providing a workforce that can keep the economy going? And as important, if not more important, community vitality and vibrancy. How do we create a community where locals can afford to live? You have a range of locals, a range of household types, the whole notion of the fabric that it takes to make a community. So the data that Carson's going to walk through here shortly reflects this dual goal of economic vitality and community vibrancy. And we've tried to marry those together in the data and ultimately in the recommendations.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. And so The main components of this, you can think about them in terms of catch up, so meeting existing demand or existing housing need, and then keep up, so meeting future housing need. And the first three bullets here fall into the catch up category. So there's cost burden, there's unfilled jobs, and there's in commuting. And I'll get into these in detail. And then there's meeting future housing demand from growth. And a note here is we only accounted for need between 30% of area median income and 150% of area median income. That's because below 30% of area median income is only realistic to serve with very deep subsidies from state and federal programs, and above 150% is realistically served by market rate housing. So we kept it between those two marks. So the first thing I want to talk about is cost burden. And so what does cost burden mean, first of all? So cost burden households are households spending more than 30% of their income on housing. This represents, in effect, current Glenwood Springs households that are in unaffordable living situations. And to estimate need from cost burden, we took 50% of current cost burden households. And we took 50%, one, because it does represent a pretty significant reduction of cost burden, but also recognizes that everyone who is cost burdened would change their housing situation for various reasons. And so we thought this was the most realistic goal. And between that 30% and 150% of AMI, there 381 is the housing need from cost burden. The next category of need is unfilled jobs. And so to analyze this, we looked at job listings from the Colorado Department of Labor. And unfilled jobs are important because they're directly tied to the vitality of the local economy. When jobs aren't filled, then businesses struggle to operate. There's a lower level of service for the community at large. And so to fill these jobs, you need housing, right? To fill jobs, I mean, a big barrier to filling a lot of these jobs is the availability of stable and affordable housing. So if we're assuming that we're filling 100% of unfilled jobs, which is the goal here, that translates to a housing need of 419 between those AMI markers that we identified. So the next category is in commuting. So right now, about 22% of workers in Glenwood Springs also live in Glenwood, which means that about 78% commute in from elsewhere. So they live in another place and drive in or whatever. And reducing in commuting is important because it helps the economy, it's good for workers, and it's good for the environment, reducing miles traveled, greenhouse gas emissions, and reducing in commuting and housing people locally requires more housing, right? It generates housing need. And so our estimate here assumes an increase in the share of workers housed locally, so to speak, from 22% to 30%. So the flip side of that is reducing in commuting from 78% of the workforce to 70% of the workforce. And so if we do that, that translates into a housing need of about 546. So the last category of housing need we identified is keep up or future housing demand. And so this is based on employment growth projections. So Glenwood is going to grow over the next 20 years. We took estimates from the state demographer on this topic. Over the next 20 years, based on this growth, there's a total need for 650 units, or about 32 units annually. And so if we apply those area median income parameters, that's about 512 total units, or 26 units annually over the next 20 years. So to summarize it all here, so there's a current need so catch up of 1,346 units and a future need of 512 units. That results in a total housing need of 1,858 units, or 93 units annually over the next 20 years. And we recognize that this is a significant number, and it's definitely a goal and an aspiration, and is something that isn't solved overnight, but I think paints a picture and gives a sense of what the scale of housing need is at the moment. And I think an important thing to consider here with the needs assessment is how can different categories of need be met through housing programs. And so we have this total housing need of 1,858 units. How much of that is served by new housing construction, and how much of that is served by preservation, for example? When we say 1,858, that doesn't mean necessarily 1,858 new housing units. That housing need could be met through the preservation of existing units. So that's just something to consider when using this housing needs assessment, is that need can be met through a variety of different policy mechanisms.
The last thing I would say in terms of our presentation, what you have tonight is a quantification of need that provides a data-driven basis for taking action. That's one. Two, points of departure in terms of a strategy that give direction to the city in terms of how it can accomplish this goal. And three, it's multifaceted. There are roles for, as Carson was just mentioning, preservation, new construction. There's roles for the public sector and the city specifically to take a leadership role and take action, and big action in some cases. There's also roles for policy and using land use policy, which is an extremely powerful tool to motivate the private sector to actually accomplish some of the goal as well. So many different paths that will be activated in terms of what the city can do. And our goal was to create a document that gives that clarity of mission and also points of departure for steps the city can take.
All right. Well, that was a lot of information, and I will turn it over to y'all now to give us your thoughts.
Or Watkins, did you have any additional comments?
Nothing to add, so I think it's the time for your comments and questions.
Anyone want to start? We'll do questions and then we'll make some comments. Counselor Weimer.
So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Help me just make sure that I'm thinking of this correctly. So about 4,000 houses in Glenwood today. Is that right? That's right, right?
Yep.
Or units, houses or units, are those interchangeable here?
Dwelling units, so that includes single-family homes, apartment units.
So 4,000 dwelling units today in Glenwood with a need of 1,858, so about a 49% increase. Is that fair? So we need about 50 we need half again as many dwelling units in town as we have today in order to meet these goals.
Yes, to meet those goals, and those goals are about cost burden households.
Sure.
We showed you the percentage of households that are cost burdens, the goals for reducing in commuting, and the goals for providing housing to fill all the unfilled jobs.
Okay.
And that's also the 20 years.
Over
That's also the 500 of that.
in 20 years, we'll need that number. Did you guys take, and I might have missed it, taken into account families and marriages? So for every unfilled job, is that a dwelling unit for one person or for 2.45 people or whatever number you guys use?
We do make
Let me jump in here real quick and just say, the total target for affordable housing, a portion of that is new construction, a portion of that will be preservation. And the combination of that remains to be seen in terms of what opportunities become available in terms of preservation. So it's just important to recognize that it's not all, net new in terms of actual impact of rooftops. And then, yes, the calculations related to household composition and jobs per household. Carson, do you want to explain a little bit about the detail there?
Sure. Yeah. So with that total unfilled jobs number, there is an adjustment made that accounts for one, multiple job holders, and two, the number of employees per household, right? So a lot of households will have 2 employees in it, a couple, they both work. So those adjustments were made to it that ultimately brought that unfilled jobs total down to a housing need number.
Got it. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Sure.
Anyone else for question? Oh, Counselor Schachter.
Thank you. Appreciate the study. I'm definitely in favor of it as a guiding document for our future, not necessarily meeting all those goals. But my question is this is a question. When it comes to the goals, Andrew and Carson, I understand that we can have development neutral additions to our housing stock to meet these goals that don't create new units. Predominantly, I assume through deed restrictions and rooms, for example, motel conversions, rooms and units that do not exist now that would meet those criteria. The one question I do have related to that too, let's take, for example, a mobile home conversion, and which is naturally affordable right now in our town. And let's take a hypothetical, I don't know how Watkins knows, but let's say hypothetically we have 500 units around town and we are able to acquire and convert to ownership, say 100 of them. I have a hard time understanding how taking naturally affordable housing now helps meet that goal. It's a goal to convert to create that, but I don't understand, help me understand how that reduces our long-term goal if we're just taking naturally affordable and keeping it.
Sure. Much of it comes down to a long-term view of time. And Glenwood Springs is a very desirable place to be located. It happens to be at the confluence of 2 river valleys, up valley, both of which are perhaps the market pressure is even greater. The market will continue to seek out opportunity, and these mobile home parks that exist today may not exist in the future. And being able to secure them and preserve them is really a way to push back against market pressures that would otherwise likely redevelop. So it's definitely a worthwhile goal, and it doesn't increase the number of employees, for example, but it certainly prevents a reduction in the loss of employees and community members. These are not just employees, they're also members of the community that are involved in various ways. So keeping them engaged is also a big part of the plan.
And I would add to that one of the components of that total housing need is cost burden. So currently unaffordable situations, and so preservation policies could be implemented to make those current living situations more affordable and more stable for people, and meet a portion of that housing need.
Thank you.
I had one question. Do you have any questions? Okay. My quick question was, you referenced the workforce housing, the need that will be met if we continue to increase based on your trajectory. And you say that we'll go from 78% to 70%. Can you elaborate on just where that 8%, I kind of anticipated that it would be more satisfied, and that seems pretty negligible increase.
Maybe we can put that slide back up. I think it was 2 or 3 to the end.
It was.
Sure. Yep, here, let me go ahead and pull that up again.
And this is one of the goals that you all have the
Mhm.
ability to change, you know,
Yeah.
upward or downward. The fact that it's so negligible, I understand what you mean.
Yeah, thank you.
I think that reflects how many in commuters that we have.
Mhm.
Because when you look at that small adjustment in percentage, 8%, right?
Yeah.
When you look at the raw numbers, that's the biggest contributor to the need.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point, Watkins. And it's definitely like, it seems small, but that speaks to the scale of in commuter.
And if we were to do this, 1,800 and change increase, is that assuming that 1,800 of those units are some degree of workforce housing, or is that just saying housing stock, housing inventory? And if which case, obviously some of that will be second homes, even though we don't necessarily, that doesn't always satisfy our workforce challenges, things like that. Is that? Was that?
I'm not sure maybe you could clarify the question?
Okay, so I'm seeing that we have a deficiency of 1,800 homes, plus or minus.
Right.
And if we were to magically have the ability to satisfy that per your
Right.
stipulations of the deficiencies,
Yeah.
that 1,800, some of those would be second homeowners. Some of them would be, retirees who don't maybe contribute to the workforce, things like that. Or are you saying we are deficient 1,800 simply to satisfy the need for workforce?
No, it would be a combination. I mean, I think other communities are struggling with this also. What happens when you sell an affordable housing dwelling unit to a household where they work for 15, 20 years in the community and retire?
Yeah.
At that point, they should have the ability to remain in the community. In addition to employment, there are many ways to add value to the community, not just as a worker. And so the composition of who resides in these households, it will be a combination of workers and retirees, if you will, based on that scenario. Probably not second homeowners. That is not, they will not be eligible to reside in any of this inventory.
So just to clarify then, what I'm hearing you say is we need this 1,858 units plus any additional homes to satisfy that demographic in the community? That's
Well,
quite a bit of building.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of second homeowners that will see the Roaring Fork Valley as an amazing destination, and
Yeah.
they will acquire units in town, either existing, there might be pressure to build some, but it's really a push back against that otherwise inherent market pressure that will otherwise convert quite a bit of Glenwood into quite a bit more second homeowners than what live there today.
Okay. I appreciate your perspective. Thank you. Counselor Schachter?
Thank you. This may be directed more toward Watkins. Assuming, and assuming we have a strategic housing plan update, which we're probably going to move toward adopting. It's consistent with our comp plan. Help clarify for me if it's adopted verbatim, the way it is right now. I'm interpreting it as a guiding document wherein afterwards codes, policies, and specific actions that we and our commissions take will lead us in this direction. Is there, but in terms of literally say we don't amend it, 2 examples. For example, let's say the guiding document says we'll do a density bonus or increase up to 3 units. Does that bind us? Do we have to deal with it at this level to say, well, 3 units here, but only 2 units there, and deed restriction, things like that. So I just want, please clarify for me, maybe others, at what level we're talking about.
And what the role of this document is and
Any subsequent handcuffs, restrictions, or code requirements besides perhaps saying, yeah, we're going to adopt a couple of these strategies?
Sure. Well, this plan update in itself is not regulatory. So it
Is what?
is not regulatory.
Okay.
So it would be an advisory document. It would not obligate us to do anything except our good faith effort from our grant funding. So the implementation of a plan like this, that's another animal that's complicated and usually takes a variety of efforts and some time to do. There was some really good discussion in the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting where they asked about this as well, about how do you implement something like this. And I have to admit, we didn't have a complete answer for them. Just that it's something that we work on as the city. Perhaps we announce new programs in the future. Code changes, regulatory things can be a part of it. And this is something that we don't want to sit on the shelf though. So even though it's advisory, it's not regulatory, we do want to implement this as best we can.
Thank you.
Okay, Counselor, go.
I do not have a question. I would like to make a comment and a motion. Are we ready for that?
Yeah, I think,
Or do you have another question?
yeah, would you mind
I can hold off.
allowing Counselor Zelinski to have the floor and then
Sure.
we'll pop back to you.
Mhm.
Counselor Zelinski.
Thank you. So yeah, I have more of a question. So with this being more of a guiding document, I'm curious what the focus of this would be. I got a little bit, I don't want to say alarmed, but it caught my attention, the 48% growth or your 48% increase. And so I think I need clarification on what we're speaking about. Are we looking at that percentage is workforce housing, or are we looking for housing? Because I think that's where in the strategic housing plan, I would be reluctant to maybe adopt it like this if we are looking at increasing housing by that much. But if this is a targeted specific solution to a problem, and we're looking at, changing the way some of our housing is used, and then I could be completely on board. But I can't imagine almost 50% more of just houses. I think that seems like a unsettling number.
I completely understand. And I think that unsettlingness, that alarm comes from the data that comes out of this. So I suppose the first answer to your question is it's important for us as a city to know where we are, to have good data and good information. So that's one purpose of the plan. Doesn't tie us to doing anything, no requirements there. The targets, the 1,800 units are based on goals that you have the ability to change. Not only tonight, but in the future, we could go back and amend this if we wanted to change it. I think it speaks to the scale of the problem of affordable housing, which is, we have definitions that this is all based on. We didn't talk too much about that, but when we say cost burden households, we mean that households that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So that's the number that there are here. And it is at council's discretion to set those goals. If that number, 50% decrease in cost burden households is too ambitious, it's at your discretion, but that's where the numbers come from.
Got it.
And if I can amplify some of what Watkins just said, it really is about how the housing stock is used. I think that was one of your parts of your question. Is it more about production, or is it about how we use the stock? And that's quite a bit to do with preservation, acquisition, things like that. There's a variety of tools in the document that are going to direct city resources into how the existing housing is designated as affordable housing, in addition to new construction. But it's a combination.
Yeah, that was the greater part of my.
Yeah, sorry, Erin, go ahead. I know I have to have her. Oh, there she goes. Okay, thank you.
I'll process it. That was the greater part of my question was, I'm much more comfortable with coming at it from that direction than I am, from for instance, building our way out of the problem, because I just don't see this
Yes.
as being an achievable goal.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay. Counselor Cow, he has one more question, Counselor Gotis does.
Go for
and
it.
Then we're gonna let you go. Okay,
Thanks. Actually, it's two questions and one.
I wouldn't have let you go. One questions.
You're right. Okay, I'll forget that one. Nope.
No, we're just
The,
teasing.
the
you.
other one wasn't that important. I really wanted to know the answer was not that important. How many single family, it's probably in here somewhere in the 60 pages I skipped. How do we know how many single family houses are in Glenwood Springs?
I don't have a number off the top of my head. I could look that up for you.
I'm just curious because I think as we talk about looking at potentially zoning changes and over time, how that might take effect, I think it's important to know because we're not gonna get more units out of a 300 unit apartment complex. We might get some more units organically in neighborhoods with zoning changes. So that would be important information, I think, for us to contemplate in this discussion.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Counselor Cowp at long last. Oops. Okay, that's okay. Go ahead and touch it again. Thank you.
Usually I'm the one who presses the button again. And I really appreciate all the presentation on this and all the work that has gone into this. I think I've been through the document in detail twice now, and as well as the work session that we had, which was very helpful. And I think there's great questions here. I really like the piece of it that it gives us data to target and data to focus on, especially now that we have passed 2C and we actually have some money to work with. And that board that we are creating for 2C right now is really going to be looking for guidance aside from simply what was passed in the election, but actually a guiding document like this to really focus their work on and stay within the bounds of how that election was worded, but also have a guidance and data and numbers to work towards. And Councillor Zelinski, your questions were very good. And I think there's information earlier in this presentation, but in the document itself, that it's not about building 1,800, like trying to build our way out of it because we are so landlocked, but preserving mobile home parks or preserving some of our single family homes. We had a gentleman from our housing commission today during our work session that talked about, they as a couple would look at putting their home into some type of a community housing or land trust as part of their future planning, just because they care about the community that much. And that's not the first person I've heard that from. So I think that combined with incentives, there's a lot of preservation we could do to get there. And so to me, this whole document, it's not that it's perfect. It's not that we're going to meet all the numbers because frankly, a year or two from now, these numbers will be somewhat obsolete. But it's taken us a while to get here, but it gives us a target and a starting point and some really solid tools that we can work with. And I think specifically in looking at the comp plan, we've heard so much about community character, and the strongest way for us to preserve Glenwood's character, it's all about the people who live here and the families who live here and raise their kids here and work here and teach and live in the community. That's what it's about. And if this document can help us get there, I've been through it enough that I'm very comfortable. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this as the guiding document that it will be, and that we pass resolution 2023 it does not have a number yet. Do we want to give it a number?
Well, just
X.
It should be
X for a resolution adopting the strategic housing plan update and replacing the 2010 strategic housing plan. Maybe I'm looking at my older.
If
Do
you
guys have
just,
a
I think
number?
if you just gave it.
Okay, it doesn't have. So the resolution to adopt the 2023 strategic housing plans.
And do we have a second?
Gladly, sir.
Okay, hold on one second, Sumner. Whoops, can you touch it one more time? Thank you. There you go. go ahead.
I second the motion to adopt the plan as presented. Thank you.
Okay, so before we vote, I'm going to go ahead and see if we have any comments. Counselor Gotis.
Why do you want to go first? Okay. I think it's a lot of great work. I think it's, you know, I made a lot of notes and I was just going to start to get, you know, really in depth about what I liked and didn't like, but I think on a whole, it's a great document. I applaud your work, Watkins, Hannah, the 2C committee, the Housing Commission, everybody that was a part that I'm missing out on. So, you know, I think there are some things that are problematic, but that's just nitpicking stuff. I think I'm really excited about it. I hope this gets unanimous vote.
Okay, Counselor Sachter.
Well, I'll just echo again what Counselor Gotis said, I think, and what the rest of us have said, and Counselor Kaup. This is a guiding document. It's a culmination, really not just of the consultant's hard work, but of commissions now for years and a delayed plan. And also realizing this is not just ours. This is going to go on for generations of councils. And we now and other councils in the future will have the ability to look at this and say, here's a part we want to tackle to preserve character, or here's the number of units we want to preserve. It doesn't have to be 90 a year. So I think it's a very timely and appropriate time to adopt this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I'm going to add one, and that is that I do have some apprehension about the quantified measures. Everything else, the quality of the recommendations is just totally on point. But when I see that number is daunting. When I hear 93 units recommended per year, it is so beyond what we have historically been doing. In addition, I think that the sentiment within the community isn't referenced in this document, and that every project lately that we bring forward from the community struggles to adapt to it. To me, that's a buffer that we're not addressing in here. I think that Councilor Schachter's comments that this not be raw land development, but rather better utilizing our built environment, I'm comfortable with that. And when I see so many recommendations, it seems on point. It seems where we need to direct our energy. I would just hate to have this council be gone and have new group come in, or, you know, planning and zoning, and then have them get too bogged down on numbers, where I think that there's a quality of life here that I worry won't be met if we satisfy this 1,800 additional units. And so other than that, I'm very comfortable with it, which, you know, sounds counterintuitive to what I just said. But.
Madam Mayor, I apologize for not putting the resolution on the agenda, the resolution number. It's a resolution 26.
Okay. Would you like to amend your motion?
Yes, absolutely. To adopt.
No.
Try it again, one more time. Wrong person. There we go.
Absolutely.
I had it.
So the motion is to adopt the resolution 2023-26. Again, 2023 strategic housing plan to replace the 2010 strategic housing plan as a guiding document.
Okay. And before we move on, I'm going to ask Councilor Schachter to turn on his mic request, and then we will have him amend his second. And then we will move to Councilor Zelinski. Go ahead.
I second the amended motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilor Zelinski, you had a comment.
No, I want to really reiterate what you said. That was the one part that I kind of struggled with. And I feel like putting those specific numbers in there, though they are important to know and use as a guiding principle. And I think to create emphasis on the importance of this, I am struggling with that just a little bit. As long as that emphasis is on, kind of the preservation side rather than the acquiring side, that's the part that just feels a teeny bit uncomfortable for me. And like Mayor Lusso said, we're not just acting, I know what our character is and like where we're coming from and how we value things. As things change and evolve, I feel like a guiding document should be timeless and represent that. And that's my only reservation with this.
Okay. Counselor Godus.
Yeah, and I'd say to respond to that, I think, the only way to achieve anything, what gets measured gets achieved. And so having good data on measuring the scope of what we're looking at is going to be key to finding strategies on how to attack the problem, attack the missing middle, attack the AMI. I mean, do we have enough 150% or above? This is a great document that helps us guide there. And like, Excel or Holy Cross saying we want to be 100% renewable by X date. Man, if they, shoot for the stars, you land in the moon or vice versa. But if they get to 2030 and they're 98% renewable or any goal, we want to be 50% electrified cars by 2035. This is a guiding document. These are goals. And so I think if in 10 years we look back and we've been able to accomplish 900 units with 600 of them of some level of affordability, man, I think we'll be looking back pretty proud of ourselves. I think that, if you just, again, some of these changes aren't tomorrow changes, but if you look at, say, Park West, for example, great neighborhood, 77 single family homes. If, I don't know, 8 of those homes turned into duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, it doesn't change. I don't feel it just changes the character of our neighborhood dramatically, but you've just kind of organically, without changing the community character, just created 30 more affordable housing units. Now multiply that over like the 18 neighborhoods we have in our community. That's like 500 units right there without really trying. So I don't want these numbers to skip, because yes, if we talk about 300 unit development or 1,800 in the next 5 years, that's really scary. But if we realize that over the next decade, we're only going to probably be able to get to 700 or 800 of them. And that if you look at the last 12 years of what we've grown according to census data, we've only grown at 0.4% a year, not 4% a year, 0.4% a year. We've had a lot of growth within a 36-month period of time, really. That's not going to continue, and that hasn't continued. It's a big hump right now. I think over the 20-year period, we will look back and say we've had fairly measured, thoughtful growth. And I think the things we're doing through this document is going to continue that.
Counselor Sachter.
Thank you again. I think all this is important, and communication, we can't control future council's communication, but our communication at this point is, as it come up, saying we are not endorsing immediately 1,800 plus units to be built in our town. We have an aspirational goal. Our residents have told us that it is imperative that we create more living places for our workers and people. And the other thing, maybe the consultants would correct me, this does not all mean population growth. And sometimes we fail to understand it, that it may mean that 2 families living together in an extremely unaffordable house, unit, apartment. Now, one of those families can now afford to live in an affordable housing unit of some way, shape, or form, or kids sleeping on our couch can now afford a place. So it's not, oh my gosh, we're going to expand Glenwood's population hugely. So I think it's important for us to keep communicating that. And we are interested in Glenwood character. Thank you.
Counselor Kaup.
I would just like to echo the comments that I heard from both Councilor Zelinski and you, Mayor, that, I think it's up to this council how we use and implement a document like this. And when we listen to the community, and we do hear so much about preserving character, you know, everyone can interpret that differently, but to me, it means keeping the character of the town, the city, which has always been a place to live and work. And if that means we can use this document to guide us to preserve more of a housing that we have for that income range of 30% to 150% AMI. However we do that, through many tools that are outlined in the document, that, you know, would be the preference of a council like this, say, over than just seeing a lot more building. And I think that's going to be up to us to provide that guidance for, and that's a good thing.
Okay, with that in mind, is there anyone else that wants to add any last comments? And otherwise, we'll go ahead and call the question.
We haven't hit the show votes yet, so.
You know, this is a plan and does not require public comment. So while I do always appreciate Mr. Vick's comments, this evening we are not taking public comment.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay, moving on to item number 12, West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition update.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I know you were excited for West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. It's me. I'm going to make this very quick. You guys have a very heavy schedule tonight, but I think it's important to update you on the programs that you contribute to. So if you are unfamiliar, let's make sure this is sharing on Zoom. The Glenwood Springs is a member of West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition. And we've actually been a part of this process since about 2017, when council made the, if I may say so, very wise decision to put me on the housing track. And I've been there ever since. So West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We became that in the last year. We actually have 8 jurisdictional memberships. You can see us up there. So that does include ourselves, City of Glenwood Springs, Carbondale, Basalt, Snowmass Village, Aspen, Eagle County, and Pitkin County. We also have representatives from CMC. So that's our board makeup there. And you guys send me as a representative to this board, and I represent Glenwood Springs interest, but also I represent a regional interest for Glenwood Springs, since as we all know, we're pretty connected. So that's the map that we're looking at that this nonprofit covers as far as our jurisdiction. I'm not going to go too much into the history. If you guys ever want to grab me a coffee, I will go through it from 2017 onwards. It's been a great 5 or 6 years. But this also ties into our Roaring Fork Regional Housing Study that was completed. And we've done some updates since then with some new data that we've got grants for. Many of you were at the Housing Summit in Aspen, where I presented some of that information. And these are graphs indicating some of those regional pressures and trends that we saw in COVID-19 that made our housing crisis more of a crisis. And these are scary graphs with doom and gloom, basically pointing at trends in demand and supply and how prices have gone up, wages haven't kept up, and that's where we're at today. And that's why this group actually exists, so that we can approach this from a regional perspective. We've had a lot of documents. We've been very busy in our short life since being a 501c3. So we have housing programs and strategies toolkit. We had a resiliency and recovery roadmap that was also a part of this, leading into us becoming a 501c3. So we're really in developing stage of our housing strategies, but we've come a long way in a short amount of time, which points to what 8 government workers can do when you get us all in a room once a month. So out of our housing strategies, there's the 4 C's, and this might be very interesting on the heels of what we just talked about: conserve, convert, construct, and create. What I just sensed is there's some hesitancy around construct, and we've also seen that in the community and as a region. And so West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition has focused almost exclusively on development neutral, as Sumner mentioned before. I think we might have actually coined that term, but and so I pointed out here, our current priority strategies are in the convert and create. So convert from free market to protected affordable. So that's not new construction. And then create the environment through policy and codes. So that's what we do here every day, is changing how we approach our policies of what we're doing with our housing stock. So this is just going into a little bit more on those 2 aspects, which are a priority right now. On the convert aspect, we're looking at an ownership buy down program, also a bedroom incentive program. And on the environment side, we currently have, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's another lovely grant from DOLA, an IHOP grant, and our consultants, which are different consultants from the other IHOP grant that you just saw, are looking at every jurisdiction's policies and codes as we speak. I can see Jonathan glazing over. I know, too much code. What? Just staring off.
We're talking about pancakes up here.
Pancakes.
Yeah. Is it,
Pancakes.
can you,
Oh, yes.
it's not IHOP. Can you tell us what that is an acronym for?
Innovative Housing Opportunities Program.
Okay, cool.
Not as exciting as pancakes, but so another IHOP grant. So that consultant is looking at all of those members' policies and codes and going to be making recommendations on how we can make them better, possibly as a region, and align them. That is going to be coming your way shortly. Another presentation. So this is, to end this presentation, this is a list of the accomplishments so far that West Mountain Regional has achieved. There's a lot of dollar signs there. We have received quite a few grants in our startup phase. And so that does include DOLA administrative grant for the strategic planning. So we do have a 3-year plan with specific goals and how we're going to get there, focused on development neutral strategies. $100,000 IHOP plan, that's the one I just described, not pancakes. $25,000 from CHAFA to support equitable outreach in our efforts. Very important when it comes to housing. We have a housing toolkit with program plans, and most important down there, and probably the biggest dollar item, we applied for $3 million in, don't ask me on that acronym, AHIF 23 grant loan for our buy down program, which is the first program we are choosing to roll out. I tried to make that really quick. This is just an update to tell you what's going on in that regional collaborative that we are a member of. We are a dues paying member. It's $10,000 a year. And this is what you have gotten for that $10,000, which I think is pretty spectacular. And with that, I will end it and answer any questions and let you get on with your agenda.
Questions?
Thanks for putting in the time.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Counselor Godus.
We had talked about and generally supported, I saw Counselor Colin Laird up there on the Zoom. I don't know if he's still in, but we had talked about exploring the idea of combining or having a shared position with our potential future housing manager and some administrative person that could help at whatever it is, 0.25%, 0.5%, job share. Thank you. That's great.
That's the word you're looking for.
Has that been discussed with your larger group? And if so, where are those discussions?
It has been a topic that's come up peripherally. We, and I have to switch my the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition is actually just finishing up their final round of interviews for that position. We actually received a lot of candidates for it, so that's very promising. And we're in the final rounds of that. I think ongoing discussions need to occur around that topic of how it could work. Just from the city hat that I wear, our programs and policies are going to be a little bit different from what West Mountain Regional Housing is doing. So I think there's some possibilities there. It would just take a little bit more time to work out. There has been discussions around from several of the municipalities, a fee for service type of program. And so City of Glenwood Springs has an interest in a buy down program. And West Mountain Regional is doing a buy down program. Perhaps there's a fee for service model where City of Glenwood Springs puts in a little bit more funding that they want for their buy down program, and it's run by West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition is also an option for consideration. But I think the job share aspect, we haven't had the time to really talk it through, and West Mountain has moved through to get their administrative online because they really needed it. So that is a little bit maybe further ahead than we've had the discussion here, but it has been brought up.
And another question, I see that, this is Pitkin, Eagle, Garfield counties and the municipalities. Is Newcastle, Silt, Rifle, any of those municipalities involved? Are they a $10,000 a year paid member? What involvement do they have?
And just a correction, it's Pitkin and Eagle, but not Garfield.
Okay, so
Not-
okay.
They are aware of our presence, and just like the Colorado River Valley jurisdictions, we make presentations to them and we open the door for when they find what we're doing to be valuable. And that's why I'm giving updates. And I just gave this presentation down at Rifle to some of those jurisdictions as well as Chaffa to just remind them, if you didn't think that we were worth the value a year ago when we were just starting, here's our list of accomplishments. So if this looks good to you, the door is open for your membership, but currently no one below Glenwood Springs. So no one in the Colorado River Valley except for ourselves is on the board.
With that.
Thanks.
I have a quick question for you. The 10,000, that's a recurring annual.
Yes, it
And,
is.
and will it come up? Is it something we could discuss this evening in order to kind of get it in our budget cycle where we know that it's happening?
Myself and my
Mhm.
predecessor have made sure that it's in your budget
Thank
line
you.
items
Perfect.
to review when budget comes around. So it will be there again
Okay,
for 2024 consideration.
excellent. Thanks for that
Mhm.
point of clarification. With that, I will kind of look for a motion of support, or I think, is this just an update? I
Just
guess
an
we
update.
just an update. I was trying to get the money. Like, I was like, do you want it? Because I'm like ready to give it to you. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Hannah. We appreciate you. We're going to take a short break and then we're going to come back to item 13. We are back in session. There we go. We are going to start back up with item 13, ordinance 2023-11, fat, oil and grease and oil sand separator. Matt Langhorst, please take it away.
Good evening, council. I'm going to try to keep this under 30 seconds. Just kidding. We had talked about this previously in a work session that we do have fats, oils, and grease and a sand oil separator regulations, best management practices, guidelines, all those kinds of fun things within the our folds. But there is no teeth to that because it's not part of the code. So what this ordinance is actually bringing in some language on what best management practices are for fats, oils, and greases and sand oil separators, some definitions of what BMP means, what FOG means, what SOS means, which is sand oil separator, and some updates to the waste discharge regulations, kind of taking the city manager name off of everything, because I don't believe Beverly wants to make decisions on BOD rates, and putting in city representative, I believe is what we put in there. And then the real main teeth of this is the last portion of the ordinance, which is the code change to 80-80-30, which is fines for not following the regulations. And it's like the water regulations we have right now. You get a written warning. The second warning is a fine. Third warning is a fine. The fourth warning is municipal court appearance, and they can levy fines and penalties at that point for not following the regulations. I don't think we've gotten that far with anybody with the water regulations. I don't anticipate we would get that far with anybody with fats, oils, and greases or sand oil separators, but it gives code enforcement a little bit of teeth to say, hey, we've asked you nicely, please just do this because the fine is going to cost you more than to just deal with it. So you might as well deal with it. So we would be looking for you to pass this on first reading. Second reading, as long as there's no questions or concerns, we'd probably just go on consent agenda next council. Questions, comments, concerns from council?
No comments? Okay, we'll close comments and we will open it to public to see if the public has any questions, as this is an ordinance. We will close the public comment. I don't think there's anybody even online. Bring it back to council. I'll entertain a motion. Counselor Zelinski.
I make an motion to approve the amendment to, do I say that whole number?
Read the whole thing.
2023-017 ordinance 2023-11. And then I say amend.
No, you don't have to amend it if you're
Perfect.
accepting it exactly as it is.
Second.
Okay, we have a first by Counselor Zelinski, a second by Counselor Godus. Let's go ahead and call the question.
That's how you do it. I do not have 25 slides. I'm sorry. Actually, my computer died. I did have a small presentation, but you're like, you're done. It's like, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion
Appreciate it.
passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, yeah, I know. Yeah. I know Wendy. Wendy is training this evening so that she can fill in for Ryan Muse as needed. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item 14. That is the fee waiver agreement for the Benedict Affordable Senior Housing Project. Welcome back, Watkins.
Well, thank you, Watkins Folk Gray, Senior Planner. I don't have too much to share with you all besides what's in the packet. I don't have a presentation for you all. We do have our applicants here in person, and so they will want to speak to you all. The Benedict is a proposed project, 34 unit senior housing project on a vacant parcel near the 27th Street roundabout. I should say the western roundabout. They're requesting a fee waiver for the fees that are in your packet there: park lane dedication, school lane dedication, fire impact fee, public art fee, water system improvement fee, and sewer system improvement fee. What you're doing tonight would be to approve staff to finalize an incentive agreement, an affordable housing incentive agreement with the city. This does not obligate, this doesn't permit the new development. That'll go through the normal process as it is. This is just about a request for a waiver of fees. And so the city council is the deciding body on whether fees should be waived or not. That is why I'm bringing it before you. The applicant is Catholic Charities Housing, which I believe is an arm of the Archdiocese of Denver. Our applicants can correct me or clarify that. And I think if you don't have any questions for me, please tell me if you do. I was going to turn it over to the applicants.
Any questions for staff? Counselor Cap.
Hi, Watkins. Will this project come before council or is it small enough that it will not?
It will trigger it will be a major site architectural plan, so you will be seeing it.
Oh, we will. Okay, so
We
we
will.
can't comment on it right now. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Godus, and before you ask questions, just as a reminder, questions are specific to the fee waiver, not any type of units, height, anything like that. Do you want to talk?
I withdraw my question.
Okay, great.
Counselor.
Okay, Counselor Zelinski.
So I just had a quick question. I am looking at the fees in Parkland, school land, public art, like those are easy to approve. The fire impact, the water and sewer improvement fees are a little bit stickier just from a infrastructure kind of perspective. And so is there any other offset to that opportunity other than just, oh, thank you. Other than just purely waiving them?
And are you asking, are you able to opt to waive part of it or?
Yeah, I just was curious because I just know like as we continue to develop and just innately, there's a higher, I guess, impact on all of our infrastructure. And so adding to it, I'm always a little bit wary of just, I want to be mindful of waiving fees kind of off the cuff.
Sure. It is within your authority to do a partial waiver if you'd like to, or to waive some of these fees, but not all of them.
And I think another question is, are there other funds that could offset this versus simply to waive them?
Usually it's Steve that gives me that look. This time it's Yvette. We have historically occasionally on to make the water and sewer fund whole, have pulled funds from other sources. Primarily, that's the general fund you are going to hear during the budget cycle. There's no money there.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of the tough thing. I mean, we have oftentimes the city does backfill the water and sewer fund from general funds when they do these fee waivers, just to ensure that those enterprise funds are whole.
Perfect. Counselor Sector.
Thank you. School land dedication, does that take an okay from the school district? Does not.
It does not. These are specifically our funds.
And related to,
Yeah.
once I have the attention.
Hold
of
on
our
one
attorney.
second. Yeah, let's ask the attorney.
All right.
The school improvement fees.
Do they need?
Do they have
cooperation
to
from
approve
the
it?
School
No.
district?
No.
Okay, and again,
Yes, I
given the
was.
nature, given the nature of the project and location, I'm a little less concerned about things, but related to the mayor's question, hypothetically, since this is low income, AMI restricted housing, and I think the Archdiocese, I don't think a lot of our community knows how much they've already provided to our community. Hypothetically, could 2C funds reimburse the city for some of these funds? Since it is creating affordable units, hypothetically.
I think hypothetically it could. I'd need to sit down and look at the exact language. And
we don't have
match
a
it up to the
commission yet.
program.
Yeah.
Match it up to the program. So hypothetically, yes, but I'm not prepared to.
No,
Opine on it.
that's why it was hypothetical.
Got
Thank
it.
you. I have nothing else. Madam
Okay,
Mayor.
perfect. Counselor Weimer.
The request for parkland dedication fee waiver, is that fee in lieu? Is that what that is?
It is.
And does that take them down to zero? Is that total in lieu, or is that a partial waiver of parkland requirements?
What's in your packet, the 140,000 and change, that's the total amount that we would charge them as a fee in lieu.
Okay.
When developments come through, they do have the option of dedicating parkland, actual parkland to us.
Right.
In most cases, it's not really a feasible option. So most people take advantage of the fee in lieu, and that's what this represents.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and see if there are questions. The applicant wanted to step forward and then we might have some questions for you as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Watkins.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, councilors. Appreciate your time tonight. I don't have a slide deck at all, so certainly don't have 25 slides.
Do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure
That'd
can.
be awesome.
Justin Raditz with Catholic Charities Housing, Vice President. Catholic Charities Housing is the mission arm of the Archdiocese of Denver, although we operate pretty autonomously. Started in the late 20s, and then the housing division itself in 1968. So for over 50 years, we've been operating now what's about 2,000 affordable homes across the upper half of the state. So, serving Denver up to the Greeley, Fort Collins MSA and west through the western slope in the valley. In particular, we've owned and operated the Match Buff Apartments here in Glenwood since the 90s. And we've been trying to do a lot more in Glenwood for a number of years. And we've hit some hurdles, but I think we've cleared almost all of those hurdles for this project in particular. So I know we're not here to talk about the specifics of the project. I thought at very least I could give you a little bit of the spirit of the project and kind of the partnership and kind of how we're approaching this one in the community. But again, we've attempted over the last several years to complete some other affordable projects in Glenwood Springs, in particular Cardiff Glen. We had a proposed project in Cardiff Glen that CHAFA denied financing for on account of cost of construction. That was back in 2016, so that's quite a steal back then compared to what it is today. And then also, this was before my time, but our agency also had a proposed project at the land by Walmart up in Blake and Palmer that also did not receive financing. So good news is this project did receive almost all of the financing that we need. And that's really why we're here for kind of the last leg to kind of button up the capital stack for the project. But, in general, what we're proposing here on the site is 34 units, 1 bedrooms, serving seniors 55 and over. I know sometimes projects for seniors are 62 and over. We thought it made sense for this one to set the floor at 55. The AMI levels for this project will serve 30 and 40% AMIs, as well as 70 and 80%. A lot of that was guided through the data that we received within the regional housing study that I know that Hannah helped assist with that commission. So in effect, what the rents end up looking like for these residents will be anywhere between, let's call it $500 and $1,500 a month. We will have 7 of the units would be voucher supported through Garfield County. So those residents in particular would pay 30% of their income. So again, let's just call it, $300, $400, or $500, depending on what their income is. So very, very affordable for sure, and by every definition. I think it's also important to note that the minimum affordability restriction on this project is going to be 50 years. That's something that our other capital partners, CHAFA and the Department of Housing, will require of us. So 50 years is a long time. I hope I'm still around by then, but 50 years is kind of the standard these days, and it's a great thing that it's in place. This land in particular, we identified through a board member of Catholic Charities who's been a 40-year resident of the Valley, and he actually happens to own a townhome in the hill that oversees this particular parcel. So we saw it, vacant for a number of years, obviously with the Renew facility, which is now Roanoke Fork Senior Living, and he just saw opportunity there. So that's how we came in contact. And as you know, finding flat, entitled, decent soils and affordable land here in Glenwood it's kind of the unicorn. And we think that this is the site, which is why we bought this land out of our own pockets before we even had the financing in place for the project. We just believed so much that this was the one to make it happen with. So no doubt this is a very, very expensive project, by far the most expensive project per unit that we've ever assembled. And absolutely in our presentation to CHAFA, which by the way, I should mention, we did get a 9% tax credit award. As you know, that's the most competitive form of tax credits, typically about 5 applications for every award. There's a lot of money that goes into just an application. So there were, cheers and toasting and everything once we got that phone call for sure. So that we have the tax credits. And their biggest feedback was cost of construction, no doubt. And what we've been able to do to make this project feasible, there are really 3 pieces of financing that made this project feasible. The first is we had a very generous bequest by Fritz and Fabi Benedict. Some of you may be familiar with the family. And these funds were committed for the provision of affordable housing in the valley. It's going to be perfect for this site. It allows us to buy down construction prices to pre-COVID levels, which, as you can imagine, is a really big advantage. In addition to that, it also helped us procure the land. So the land is then committed into the project. In addition to that, Catholic Charities Housing is also contemplating funding certain parts of the capital stack, including potentially the construction loan, so that at the end of the day, between the Benedict funds and Catholic Charities Housing, we could be contributing up to around $8 or $9 million in total into the project ourselves. So that's the first piece that made it possible. The second is the county vouchers. As I mentioned, we're going to have 7 units that are that have project-based vouchers through the counter. At least that's what we're proposing, and Cheryl will be taking that to her board. And that makes the really low AMI rents possible for the project. And the third piece that makes it all possible is why we're here today, the fee waivers. Not only is the expense of the fee waiver so critical to waiving to make the project work, but the Division of Housing requires typically the local municipality to match their award. And they typically seek 1-to-1, and the division's putting in over 7 figures into this project if they approve the amount that we've applied for. Now, obviously, we're not asking for that number from the city, but typically what the division will do, so say for smaller municipalities that don't have quite, the robust budgets that maybe a Fort Collins or Denver would have, they at least want to see a path to fee waivers, because then that becomes the local contribution, and that's the match that makes them feel good. So in general, that's what we're pursuing here. And if everything rolls out as planned, we hope to break ground on this project May of next year, plus or minus, right? There's a lot of stuff in between now and then construction would probably take about 12 to 13 months. So in effect, if everything goes well, in April or May of 2025, we could have 34 new units restricted for 50 years for the community.
Great. Our city manager, Beverly Marshall, has a question.
No, I wanted to comment just to add some information, which is, as you know, Prop 123, you said the council said that you supported us submitting for the Prop 123 obligation. Thanks to Hannah and her very sharp pencil. The original number we thought we were going to have to commit to has gone down to 21 units a year, which is doable. And with the number of housing units proposed here, that would satisfy the first year and some of year 2 of that obligation. So again, I guess you could look at it as an investment of waiving these fees. That's helping us to buy into this 1, 2, 3, which then opens the door for even more going forward. So I did want to say that there is definitely a win-win for this discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to bring it back to you, and I have one question from the staff report. It says the Benedict will provide at least 11 units and potentially 34 units. What does that mean?
Beverly, feel free to jump in if you'd like. But you're right. You got a sharp eye. Obviously, our commitment hasn't been accepted by the state yet, and there could be some details to be worked out. So in what they provided us, they gave us some ranges that were, 30 to 40% and then 40 to 70%. Okay. So what the state has said initially is that they're going to, for rental housing, not for sale, for rental, they're going to count units that are 60% below. And so looking at what they gave us, 40 to 70%, there could be a little bit of, something falling below 60 or at 60, something falling, above that. And then also there is potential for some wiggle room. There's a waiver process that I don't know too much about yet, but is being defined so that we could potentially go up higher and still count them. So.
Okay. But Justin is confirming 34 units are what you're planning and what you're building, correct? 34 units?
34 units.
Okay,
That's
great.
right.
Thank you. There was a little ambiguity how I read that, so thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? I will make one comment then, and that is that it would be very, we're gonna do this. There's potential of doing fee waiver. It would be very kind, and I would love to see an incorporation that residents could potentially be partners and spouses to those who are in the memory care unit, just because of the alignment and proximity. I know that that's a challenge for elderly couples, that they're able to access one another.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll just put it out there,
Yeah,
plant a little seed.
absolutely.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mhm. Counselor Schachter?
They're related comments. First of all, I think all of us give up future general fund revenue a bit reluctantly, but there are ways to deal with it that we will discuss, because it's not now, it's next year and the year after. But as I look at this, in terms of our overall housing goal, strategic plan, and everything, it fits. Parkland dedication's always an issue, as well as other things, as Counselor Zelinski mentioned. In this case, the location and the nature of the demographic isn't a huge parkland impact in our town, but more importantly, when I align the goals and align what you're doing, and I look at the door cost to Glenwood of under $11,000 per door compared to hundreds of thousands of dollars per door for other projects, any of my reservations are minimized and released, and I would support it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Counselor Gotis?
Yeah, I'm a little hung up on the parkland dedication as well. I think, to Aaron's point, we can, because I think you were concerned about sewer and water and some of those impact fees, and I'm always protective of fire impact fees. Yeah, just because Gary's there. If Gary wasn't there, I wouldn't care. But no, I remember having this conversation 6 years ago, sitting here at this table, about another project that was not near as valuable or as good for our community. So I'm much more willing, but we just, we zeroed out our parkland dedication fund a couple of years ago when we did phase 1 of Sayre Park. Didn't have a lot in because we tend to waive these fees for regular projects, good projects, bad projects. These are the easiest things to do. But then when we come back, Summer, to your point, in a couple of years and go, we really want to do something at the confluence that's neat, or man, North Landing really needs some love, or phase 2 through 4 of Sayre Park, which we haven't done yet. Where's the money for that? We're scratching our head, because shouldn't there be more money in this parkland dedication fee, which I think we've all said, every council has said, those parkland dedication fees are not reflective of the fee in lieu of that we collect for these projects is not commensurate with the cost of actually finding parkland dedication by a long shot. So I'm happy to approve this. If we didn't do the parkland dedication fee, we have enough needs of our existing parks that are in kind of shabby shape as it is. So I would support every other impact fee waivers. I'm sorry, Gary. But I won't support it if it has the parkland dedication fee in it, even though I think it's a wonderful project and I love it, and thank you.
Counselor Zelinski?
So I'm going to go back to kind of my earlier point. Would it be something that we could look at? I know that we have to look into it, but reimbursing those funds or finding an alternate way. I think rather than getting hung up on, this is such a worthy project, and it is, and it's an underserved segment of our population as far as affordability goes. I think that we talk so much about workforce housing, but we don't talk as much about senior housing. And I think that all of the future kind of eye is going to be on that workforce component. And this is in front of us right now. Maybe we just dedicate ourselves to trying to figure out how to reimburse that parkland fee from alternate sources rather than the general fund, but maybe 2C or something, and still move forward.
Counselor Kaup?
I would agree with Counselor Zelinski. I'd rather see that, even if we find somewhere the tobacco fund or the marijuana fund. I mean, somewhere that we could come up with that funding to support this project. I think with all the other financial assistance that they are receiving, I'd like to see the city step up and be part of a project that helps the seniors in our community and helps especially low-income seniors.
Are you wanting to talk again?
Yeah.
Okay,
That was fine.
okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the fee waiver agreement with, and I'm trying to get to yes here. With, and if people don't support, that's fine. It with the parkland dedication fee portion paid for by some other fund to be determined, as long as it's not the general fund. So we can get creative, whether it's 2C, whether it's another fund, but we're already deficit spent. So that's my motion, to be clear, period. And we're already projected $800,000 of deficit spending this year. We have on the agenda tonight 1.8 million of additional unbudgeted expenses this year. I want to be very protective of the general fund. I think there's a way to find that, what is it, $134,000, $140,000. We can make up the water system, water and sewer improvement fees. I mean, that is probably an extra quarter per ratepayer for a year to make that up. It's not significant when spread across the whole community. It's a community good, but there is no way to take that parkland dedication. So that'd be my charge to Yvette, is to get creative, and us, and it's us really, to get creative on whether it's 2C or some other fund, but I'm just very protective of that general fund. So that's my motion. That'll get me to a yes, if that's important to anybody else.
Does anybody else have comments or second?
I have a question.
Okay.
Is that something that we can do?
Yeah, let me turn you on. Hold on one second. Okay, go ahead.
Is that something that we can decide here? Okay.
Yep. Counselor Schachter.
My question regarding the motion
Mhm.
is, does the motion approve fee waivers for the benefit of this project? And finding the other $140,000 will happen internally, but the fee waivers, by magic or otherwise, the fee waivers will be granted based on this motion.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And did I hear?
Then I will say.
Okay,
Yes, sure.
Great, perfect.
Sure.
So I have a motion by Counselor Godus, a second by Counselor Schachter. Big picture, what I heard to confirm is that you'd be walking away with a guarantee that we will in some way, shape or form waive those fees, either through our general fund and or.
No.
No, the fees are waived.
Fees are waived.
It's on you
It's
guys or on
to find the
staff to find the
140,000.
$140,000
Other than the
someplace
general
else.
fund.
Perfect. Other than the general fund.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have clarified that. Counselor Cup, do you have a question or a comment?
Question Just for either our city manager or our financial manager. Just, is that doable?
I think we can have those discussions as part of the budget discussions. I think there are ways to come up with that. As Counselor Godus said, that decision as to how things get prioritized fall with the council.
Exactly, right. It'll impact something else, but, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Let's call the question.
Counselor Zelinski, yes. Mayor Wusso, yes. Counselor Godus, yes. Counselor Weimer, no. Counselor Kaup, yes. Counselor Schachter, yes. Motion passes. 5-1.
Thank you.
That's a right on past Mitchell.
Okay,
Worried me that Beverly, when she said, we'll find the money, looked at me and went like this.
Okay, so we are gonna pop back over to item H from our consent agenda, which was resolution. Yes. No, I said, oh, did I say between 15 and 16?
Actually, what I'd like to suggest is that I've got to be here until the bitter end. Why don't you
Yeah.
put me at the end
Okay.
and get the rest of these people out of here?
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and then do resolution 2023, item 15. I did have that. Oh, I was gonna do it.
Good evening. So this is the devolution process. We discussed this at a work session several weeks ago. You gave direction to us to go back to CDOT to ask for more money, and we were able to do that. Just real quick, history on the devolution, just so we're all clear. This is the section of 6 and 24 from Donegan to essentially exit 116. This would transfer the road from CDOT to the city of Glenwood Springs. We would take ownership of that road plus all maintenance and further operations. At the work session, I believe the number that CDOT was going to give us for the 20 years of the future maintenance was approximately $180,000. We've gone back and talked to them, and that number now is $350,000. So we were able to move the needle, so to speak. So what we need from you guys to move this forward is an approval of the resolution to take us to the next step with CDOT. I'm going to leave it there, short and sweet. I'm happy to answer any and all questions from anybody.
Counselor Sachter.
Congratulations on getting more money. It's allegedly a 20-year maintenance payment by CDOT. My question is, and we may need our manager, mayor, where does this money go? I mean, it's not that much a year. It's $17,000-$18,000 a year for maintenance. How is that accounted for in terms of really paying for maintenance for 20 years?
Well, you know, from what I understand is these roads are relatively new. They've been recently maintained. And this would go into the streets fund, I believe. Yvette, is that correct? Yeah. So the streets fund, so that would go toward that. But in addition to that, the real benefit would be if we need to make decisions about that section of road, we now don't have the administrative burden of going through that process, which can be quite time consuming. Just looking at the amount of time it's taken just to have these conversations back and forth, just to have them give it to us. It's been quite time consuming. So this gives us a little more control. So in a way, we're kind of buying into getting that control.
The net benefit to the city is positive. From a financial point of view, we don't know where that money will be 20 years from now necessarily, but we assume the city is assuming the responsibility. It has to be taken care of.
And we do a lot of the day-to-day maintenance on it anyway. So, and without any revenue that's attached to it. So
And one other question from a more positive point of view, does this give us more leeway in the goal of improving that pedestrian bikeway in terms of not having to wait around for OKs and approvals?
It does. So, you know, you're referring to the bike path that's on our agenda. In fact, that's one of our projects that we're looking to, get designed and possibly bid in next year or the next 18 months. And it doesn't necessarily shorten it to the greatest extent because we actually do have a current a grant with CDOT. So we have to follow some of the CDOT regulations. But as the city manager mentioned, it relieves us of the burden of going back to CDOT to do the normal things. And if something were to happen, I don't know an example, we can actually go out there and do it ourselves without, going through prior approvals.
Thank you.
for example, if we wanted to apply a consistent speed limit through that section, right now, we'd have to go through a huge process in order to get them to do it because that's under their purview. We would then be able to make that determination.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, Yep. I think this is a first reading, right? Or not reading, it's a
one-time resolution, just need a
one-time
motion to
resolution.
approve.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if you want to have,
yeah.
it's,
I think
Yeah.
I think I would just entertain a motion. So Counselor Cow.
I will make a motion that we approve resolution 2023-24. Intergovernmental agreement between the state of Colorado Department of Transportation and the city of Glenwood Springs for the devolution of a portion of US Highway 6 in Glenwood Springs.
Counselor Zelinski.
I second that motion.
All those in favor? We'll just do,
verbal?
yep.
Yeah.
We'll just,
Aye.
aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Oh,
wait, you
said nay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say it. I'm
Nay.
sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. The motion passes 5-1 with Counselor Gotis subjecting or abstaining, whatever, saying no. Okay, yeah, I did.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. I need to keep it. It's true.
I'm sorry, what was that, Counselor?
Yeah,
Gotis? I couldn't hear
totally.
you.
Okay, now we're gonna go to item H. Item H. Now we're gonna,
Yeah, I was gonna do the letter. Let's
you wanna
have-
go last?
Last,
You wanna
well, I would
truly
like
go
to let
last.
Harper go if I could.
Okay, ready, set, then we'll do.
Just while,
Okay.
Harper's getting up here and getting set up, she has a very short slide presentation. Gonna do some background. I think this is good education for our community around this. And I know a lot of you guys have been very interested in what's going on with Uinta rail corridor, so. No,
No, I should be.
on the Sheridan in council chambers.
It's showing up there?
Next.
No.
And staff, you don't have to hang around.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. So hi, I'm Harper Powell. I'm working with Carp New Hanlon this summer. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of the Uinta Basin Railway project and kind of where it's at right now in terms of what the project is requesting from the federal government. So to begin on just background of what the Uinta Basin Railway project is, it's a proposal to vastly increase production of oil from the Uinta Basin in Utah. The proposal is to use the Union Pacific Rail Line along the Colorado River to transport around 350,000 barrels of oil per day. The railway project's environmental analyses were pretty grossly inadequate and didn't account for these downline communities. Eagle County and the Center for Biological Diversity filed suit in federal court challenging the Surface Transportation Board's approval in 2021 of this project. And Glenwood Springs filed a supporting amicus brief along with such towns as Minturn, Avon, Red Cliff, Vale, Routt County, Boulder County, Chaffey County, Lake County, and Pitkin County. And in that brief explained a lot of the impacts this project would have on the Colorado River and I-70 corridor and the communities along its path. So the environmental and economic risks of this project, the risk of oil spill would more than double the current rate along this route, and it would increase the train traffic to about 9.5 trains up to 10,000 feet long, which is about 18 miles per day through Glenwood Springs and the canyon. So they estimate one fully loaded train could derail every year with an estimated disastrous oil spill every 4 years. This is transporting a waxy crude oil, so it's particularly toxic, has long-term effects on the environment, contains a toxic chemical called benzene. And there are also would be ongoing leaks from the trains as well as direct leaks of the oil, which is very flammable. And as we know, that is a sensitive issue here, especially. It would also cause pretty harmful water contamination for drinking water, agriculture, outdoor recreation, which is a huge industry here, as well as a lot of endangered fish and other wildlife species. The economic impact would bleed over into that as well, where here we have about 40% of our residents working in the tourism industry, and outdoor recreation is very important to our community.
So a little overview on what private activity bonds are. So the railway project is requesting these funds to support their project. And private activity bonds are low interest taxpayer funded bonds that go to privately developed and operated projects, and they're issued by the Department of Transportation. So they were started because the US government wanted to increase private sector investment in US transportation infrastructure. The bonds are tax exempt. Right now they have a pot of about $30 billion total, with 17 billion of that already allocated to certain projects. Of the remaining 13, this railway project is requesting about 2 billion of the 13. So a very large percentage. Most of the projects that have been allocated go towards high occupancy vehicle lanes, managed lanes, light rail transit, bridge and highway replacements, a lot of things that really help like passenger railway and broad kind of public interest projects. Whereas this project is not directly or not as, it's a different type of project and not quite a direct benefit for the public. The use here is to transport oil that will eventually go to the Gulf of Mexico. So kind of the ultimate takeaway, what happens next? Right now, we are waiting for the federal court. So this case was heard in, I believe, the beginning of May in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. So we're waiting for that decision to come down. But in the meantime, a lot of local governments have already sent letters of opposition to representatives, senators, supporters, as well as the Department of Transportation and Secretary Buttigieg, which is what we are proposing to do here. So other local governments that have already sent these letters include Grand County, Eagle County, Chaffee County. We have the Northwest Colorado Coalition of Governments. The members of Colorado General Assembly also wrote letters, and Aspen, the city of Aspen, other stakeholder groups. So we would be among a large group of constituents that have already kind of put their support behind opposing the use of private activity bonds. So I think that's kind of where that lands. There is another sort of related project called the Wildcat Loadout that we might want to, if we're going to oppose the Uinta Railway project, might also be worth considering opposing this project as well. It's somewhat related to the overall increase in oil production from the Uinta Basin, but it might be a way of trying to get around while this lawsuit is going down the pike. And so it's a proposal to increase capacity in this particular area of Utah called the Wildcat Loadout. And I think the plan is to try to blast a highway project as well for that. But they want to increase capacity by 1 billion gallons per year from 30,000 to 100,000 barrels of oil per day. And so they are seeking BLM approval, and they are wanting to do an environmental assessment and not go through the full process of an environmental impact statement, which is much more involved. And so members who are opposing this, like the Center for Biological Diversity, are asking people who are interested to contact the BLM in opposition for this Wildcat Loadout project.
So I think what you have before you is a couple of different letters. One is more specific to Glenwood Springs. One is more generalized if you wanted us to try to put together the broader coalition that we did for when we filed the amicus brief. I think either or both, with your approval for the mayor's signature, is what we're seeking tonight if council is still interested in continuing to oppose the project.
Councilor Godus.
I move that we support is it appropriate for a motion at this point?
Well, let's do this. Are there any comments or questions prior to a motion? Mitchell?
I was just going to ask if you.
Hold on one second. I'm going to put your mic on.
I was going to ask Harper, thank you. Good job. I was going to ask if you knew sort of the position of our national our state representatives in DC on this.
Yeah, so Senators Hickenlooper and Senator Bennett, as well as Representative Joe Neguse, they sent a combined letter to Secretary Buttigieg, very adamantly asking him to oppose the use of private activity bonds for this project, and they cited the number of projects that private activity bonds have supported and been in, and pointed out how those were in contrast to this project, and said it would be, you know, an unprecedented use to use $2 billion for something that doesn't really have much public interest benefit. And then our Attorney General, Phil Weiser, also sent a letter, but yeah, those are kind of our state.
Anything from Representative Boebert?
I don't believe.
I don't think we have heard from the representative on this particular issue. I think it is a difficult one for her to take a position on, given that the third CD has always been a heavily extractive industry. I do think it's notable that Grand County, which is typically much more reserved about these kinds of matters, has been aggressive in opposing this with their deep concerns regarding the river corridor. So, I mean, and that is a county that is traditionally very conservative in their approach and very pro resource extraction.
And then anything from our commissioners?
I don't think we've seen anything from our commissioners yet.
Okay.
And then before Counselor Godus makes comment, I will support his motion. However, one comment that I think we should add to the letter is that historically, these funds are used to repair bridges, like all these different things that you indicated. And bridges in the United States, I don't know if you guys are like aware of this, but I think 1 in 3 bridges in the United States is in need of repair. I think like 233 million or yeah, what did I just read? 233,000 different bridges are antiquated or unsafe. And so to use these funds in a way that really just benefits such a small sector and private sector versus actually applying them to infrastructure that supports us all. I think something along those lines, I'd love to see that incorporated. What's it? It's not in there.
It's just TVs are consistently funded.
Well, you know, but I'm wanting to call that out a little bit. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I recognize what it's historically been used for, but I'm saying like, it seems irresponsible to use it for this when this other end of the spectrum of what it's historically been used for has still not been satisfied. So, Counselor Kemp, do you want to?
I just had a.
Hold on one second.
I was going to ask for a clarification on the difference between the two letters. You mentioned.
It really was, there was a discussion, the mayor and I, and you, I think, had a discussion around, do we try to put the coalition together?
Right.
Or do we send a letter that is very specific to Glenwood? And that's really the difference, is that we probably highlight Glenwood in the one letter much more specifically.
Okay.
And the other one is one that you could have a half dozen or a dozen signatories to that addresses more generalized concern. And frankly, we could do both.
Okay, and I wouldn't mind doing both. I guess I would support the most aggressive action that we can take to be against this project. Yeah, stand up against.
Hey, Counselor Godus.
I will make the motion that we send both letters. And I'll just say, I think that the one thing it doesn't call out that, you know, I'm not going to add, I think it's a great letter. But, you know, 53 million metric tons of carbon is what this is annually, is what this is projected to increase. So I don't want to, you know, be worrying about tar sands in Canada and all that. We can't chase every one of these things, but this directly impacts us from a railroad corridor. But beyond that, I mean, we're getting killed with climate change, like literally getting killed with climate change. We have fires regularly. We have a depleting Colorado River and watersheds. So this is climate change is a real and present danger. And to support anything in this country, I mean, we can make a case of writing letters of opposition to anything that produces 53 million metric tons annually of carbon, because that is a direct threat to our community, our economy, and our people.
So I will actually second your motion, but I would like a little more call out to climate change and I'd like a little more call out to the bridges.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted.
Counselor Zelinski.
And the vital nature of the Colorado River. I think
Yeah.
that is like the height of your responsibility to put something like this right next to such a vital.
Yeah, without question. And so, keeping in mind, we have a pending federal lawsuit over the EIS process that was gone through, that we are, that we weighed in as an amicus on. This is really targeted on those private activity bonds and how those are being used. So I hear you. It's two, right. Those are, yeah, no, and I understand. I think we're trying to be as targeted and as surgical as we can on the particular issue that we're pushing the button on at the moment.
And just to add to that, for like a little reassurance that there are other groups that are very particularly writing about how much of a climate impact and carbon bomb this is. And so it's great if we want to support that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. You want to call the question? Yeah, I did the second. We'll do a voice one because I have trouble with nays. Okay.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, hey, Ryan, can I have control of the? Let me.
Yeah. Okay. So, hey, y'all, can we do item H now?
Yeah. That's item H up for you guys, so there's a gap.
Okay.
There we go.
So hard.
Trying so hard. Can you continue this? No, I'm. What you have before you tonight is a resolution authorizing the mayor or mayor pro tem to sign necessary closing documents with regard to the acquisition of 1205 Riverside Drive. You gave direction several months ago to negotiate a contract for the acquisition of this property. That contract was approved, I can't remember, a month and a half ago at a council meeting. This is really an administrative detail because closing is scheduled for the end of the month before our next regular council meeting. And that's why I kind of added it late. Title company called up and said, hey, we want a resolution authorizing signatures. For anybody who might still be on's benefit, what you see up on the screen before you outlined in red is currently owned property by the city of Glenwood Springs along the Roaring Fork River. The property outlined in green is the property that is being acquired. I will tell you, going back to the early 2000s, the city has methodically tried to acquire that lower bench. It's one of the best access places in town, honestly, to get down to interact with the river. Recently, a section of that, as you know, was just designated as part along the edge of the river on part of that city-owned property, was designated as 6F lands, parklands, as part of the land exchange with the school district. And so this is another piece in that puzzle of acquiring those properties. The contract is, as Councilor Geddes has pointed out, for $1.8 million. That's very consistent with what we're seeing on property acquisition prices. It's almost 2.3 acres. So what we're seeing right now in the market and in our market analysis is about $1 million an acre. So this is slightly under market. And that's the project. Like I said, really what's in front of you, you already approved the contract and we're just kind of marching towards closing. I do need this so that I can have the mayor sign documents on the day of closing.
Questions, comments? Counselor Geddes.
Yeah, I asked this to be pulled off consent agenda. I'm going to absolutely support this. I think this is a good use of our reserves, where it's coming from. I do want to say though, that reserves are for rainy days, but they're also for opportunities like this. And I think this is an opportunity. So I think it's appropriate. But I do also want to mention that the Financial Advisory Board has recommended that we maintain a 40% reserve level. And this will take us, I think, down to about 30%. So probably not a dangerous level, but something that as we're looking for wants and likes and other things that would like to have, to me, this kind of zeroes out a lot of those conversations. I think it's worth it, because this is a once in a possibly a generation opportunity. I just want to have this council. I wanted to say it to get off my chest for this council. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the purchase of 1205 Riverview Drive.
Actually, that's not what you're
That's
approving.
the
You're-
motion.
You already did that.
Did I?
Yeah, you're approving the resolution authorizing the mayor to sign the.
Sure, that then.
Okay.
When did we approve that?
Counselor
2
Zelinski.
years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I am seconding that motion.
This one I'm gonna do voice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Let's do this. Let's move on to council comments. Shelley, oh, Counselor Cap.
Thank you. And I have to find them in all my notes from this week. One of the first ones that I have is I have a question on the parking lot on Seventh and the old wastewater, the lift station parking lot. It looks like that has been signed for 4-hour parking. And it had always been traditionally the place for employees to park for 8 hours during the workday. So I'm wondering when that got re-signed and what that was based on. Because I know even when we were talking about parking plan and possibly, looking at managing parking downtown, we always want to send employees to park down there for the day. So I'm not sure when it got re-signed to 4-hour parking.
I'm not familiar with that being
Okay.
a recent decision, so I'll have to speak with Public Works and see, because
Okay, if we could check into that and maybe get back to me on that, that would be great. And then, let's see. Then I was also, and I asked our head of finance about this. We used to get tax updates monthly, and I know they've been super busy, but we haven't had a sales tax update, I think, since March. So just wondering if we could get a sales tax update on
I will
a
ask for
regular
that.
basis. And I know we've been going through billing changes and there's a lot happening there. So
Yeah,
so I
there's
get-
with the combination of the finance software rollout
right.
and with the utility things and some other staffing things. And I know they've been working towards completion of the audit. So
Right.
it's
an
been
audit also-
taking a lot of bandwidth. So
Okay.
I will definitely relay that.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Perfect. Counselor Zelinski.
So Brianna reached out to me to ask me if I would provide some opening, not even provide, speak some opening remarks at speak some remarks. I'm tired at the opening ceremonies for Latino Conservation
Yeah.
Week, which is this starts this Saturday.
Great.
And so I agreed to do that.
Oh,
But
thank you.
they came and gave a brief presentation to Parks and Rec board or commission, whatever it is that I sit on, and it was the most beautiful map, honestly. And it's in both English and Spanish, and it's a great resource. And so I'm really excited about, this event and the potential that it has to kind of open up and be a little bit more inclusive to our public spaces and to that community that deserves to benefit for it, enjoy it as much as I always have. So that's all.
Thank you. Thanks for stepping up to do that.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to do that, so thank you so
Yeah.
much. Counselor Gotis.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we're looking at, we heard some recommendations tonight from our the housing study, and some of those recommendations were for new avenues of revenue. Some of those avenues would require a vote of the people. And I don't know that we want to put anything on the ballot this November, but it's mid-July, and I think to not have a conversation about what items I'm saying intentionally that we would want to contemplate on the November ballot. Maybe we don't want anything, but I think it lets an opportunity to go by without even addressing it. And I know we have talked in the past about if we want to have move our municipal elections where turnout's about 30% to a November of even years where turnout's 70, 80%. I think it's a great conversation to have. I don't know if we wanted to, we've talked about it in the past, we've elected not to do it, but if hypothetically, just from a timing standpoint, we would want to do that starting in 2024, instead of having to wait till 2026, it would need to go, the only way to do that, the only time we would have to do that is this November of 2023 in order to do it by 2024, because we do not have a municipal election between here now and then. So I know we've talked about that. We've talked about elected mayor. We've talked about, like I said, we heard some ideas on revenue. I would love to suggest a work session for the next meeting. I know we have our thing and they'll bump something out, but this is time sensitive if we want to get on the ballot or contemplate that. So I would suggest an hour. Ingrid's going to tell me it's only going to take a half hour, so I'd suggest 45 minutes. You want me to call you?
So here, yeah,
45 minutes is not enough time.
Oh.
A minimum of an hour just for Jonathan and then.
Here's
What is it to me? Is
to
it
kind of
kick
go
off?
back a little bit, and we actually asked Carl to do a review of the charter and
Yeah,
make
I mean,
recommendations.
I could talk you through some of that stuff. I think a couple of them are big policy questions for you, right? Elected mayor, and whether or not you want to shift the election back to November. I think those are a couple that would take up that hour, frankly. The other cleanup in the charter, we could wait until the next regular municipal election, frankly. You know, we would need to, both of those have implications for those of you that are seated and how long your terms are and when you rotate off. So that's, you know, we just need to give some thought to that. But certainly if you guys want to talk about it at the next meeting, I can be prepared to have some conversations around, I would say limiting it to those two issues, because the rest of it is, you know, a modernization of an antiquated charter that probably doesn't need to happen immediately and is maybe more appropriate even for a larger charter commission.
Oh, the one thing I would like to add is a requirement that if it's the equivalent of a referendum or something along those lines. Anytime you get a petition that's fully executed and acceptable, that it have to wait till the next regularly scheduled instead of a special election, only because I think it's a burden to our staff and to our budget.
Okay, I'll take.
That'd be
Here.
one other
Yeah,
thing I'd
yeah.
like to do.
I'll take a look at what we
Okay,
can do with
thank
that.
you.
And the timing, we could do that because we did have on our work session plan to talk about the strategic plan, but that's being moved to the 17th.
Okay.
So we could certainly add that to the August 3rd
Okay.
for discussion.
Okay.
Because now we have a little more bandwidth.
We've replaced it with Vogler.
Vogelar's not going to be that long of a discussion.
Okay.
Because we had 45 minutes scheduled for strategic, so that is not that long of a conversation.
So what I just heard is an hour work session on this at the first August meeting. Okay, great. Nothing for council. Okay, well, thank you. For the general public, we have had quite a few meetings where we haven't had a full sitting council. And with the 6 of us, I just appreciate everyone's willingness to work through items so that we don't end up on a lot of ties, you know, because I think that helps as we move things forward. So thank you all for what you're bringing and also for balancing your life, your personal life with this life so that you guys do get out and have vacations. And we will be missing, we miss Marco this evening, and then Councilor Dem will also be missing the next meeting too. So thank you all. And we will move on to report from city administration, city manager, Beverly Marshall first.
In light of the time, I don't believe I have anything to add.
Okay.
Is it my agenda item yet? Did you do this? Yeah, I did. I'm
You did. Is
being
there
funny.
anything you want to add?
What's that?
There's nothing that's changed since then?
No, I think I'm good. There's been a lot tonight.
There has been.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. And then correspondence, incoming, outgoing, we didn't have anything, so I will look for a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Any opposed to adjourning? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Have a great night all.